subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Small line of writing below the moon slate. Temple of Moon. Does it mean to worship the god of the moon? 55. Let's go take a look first. Luo Xingchen said, and walked in first. Everyone followed Luo Xingchen and walked inside. Oh, it's huge, Lucy exclaimed, looking around. It's shabby all around, and it seems to have been abandoned for a long time. Urza came to a wall and swept the dust off the wall. Is this a product of that era? Mira Jane looked around, full of curiosity. Who knows? It may be from the ancient times. 35, Luo Xingchen replied. There are pictures here, just as the two were talking. Urza's voice rang out. It also attracted people's attention. What is this? Natsu came over and asked. It's a mural of the moon, Urza replied. Looking at the broken wall below, the few handwriting engraved on it murmured. This island was originally called the Island of the Moon and was dedicated to the goddess of the moon. Frowning, Urza shook her head and said, the back of the mural is broken. It must be a relationship that has been too long ago. However, Moon Island, plus the curse of the moon, plus the goddess of the moon. Lucy touched his chin. It seems to be thinking about something. Anyway, it's weird everywhere. What are you afraid of? Just be reckless if you have something. Mira Jane waved her hand in a big way. That's right, it's over. Natsu raised his head and raised his chest. Go forward. Let me see. Is there any problem with this floor? It seemed that curiosity was haunting him. Natsu came to the middle of the corridor and kicked the ground. Don't mess around like that. BD. Lucy crossed his hips and glared at Natsu. I heard movement from behind. Luo Xingchen, who was observing his surroundings, also turned his head and looked at Natsu. For some reason, he always felt as if something was about to happen. Click, click. The sudden sound and the cracks that began to spread under the feet confirmed Luo Xingchen's idea. What are you doing? Urza, who noticed the ground shaking, turned around suddenly. Next moment, the shattered cracks began to grow wildly. Without even a second, the floor beneath everyone's feet shattered. Everyone's eyes widened instantly. BD. Natsu. Accompanied by a series of shouts, the people in the circle fell directly down the broken ground. In midair, Luo Xingchen has a quick eye and a quick hand, two hands close to Urza Mira Jane, who lost her balance due to sudden weightlessness. Although he still wanted to save others, he was powerless with only his hands. Next second, boom! Several people fell to the ground in unison. Why are you all okay? Natsu stuck his head out of the pile of rubble. He kept looking around, looking for traces of his companions. How could it be okay? It's all your fault. Lucy also crawled out of the ruins. Damn it. Why are you always thinking so out of your mind? 39 Gray was about to collapse. Urza, this time I support you and kill this guy. Then he turned his head and shouted in Urza's direction. At this moment, both Urza and Mira Jane seemed to have crashed the 707. With blushing cheeks, she lay in Luo Xingchen's arms. This is... Gray twitched the corners of his mouth. It's not. Urza broke away from Luo Xingchen's embrace. Turning around, a stream of steam emerged from his head. Even Mira Jane, who has always been bold, seemed to be a different person at this moment. He grabbed the hem of his leather jacket with both hands, not knowing what to say. Look, what is this? Just as Luo Xingchen was about to speak, Lucy's exclamation sounded. Follow Lucy's gaze. Gray's eyes widened in horror. In front of everyone, pure white cold air seeped out from the huge ice cubes. Adds a touch of coolness to the surroundings. What really terrified Gray was the behemoth in the huge ice block. This is... Gray murmured in disbelief. Die lion pull. His pupils were trembling wildly. With trembling steps, Gray stepped forward. Impossible. How could Dai Lionra be here? It is absolutely impossible. It is absolutely impossible to be here. 55, the crazy Gray, was tapped on the shoulder. Luo Xingchen's voice sounded from behind. Calm down, Gray. I can't calm down. This guy. This guy is the devil of disaster. Gray's voice trembled as he spoke. The devil of disaster. Lucy covered his mouth and looked at the behemoth in front of him. Luo Xingchen didn't speak. He passed Gray and came to the front, staring at the frozen die lying in front of me and a huge magic circle drawn on the ground. Intricate patterns are intertwined on the magic circle. Draws a bizarre trajectory that is incomprehensible. Droplet of the moon. I don't seem to need this kind of magic circle. Such doubts popped up in his mind. Luo Xingchen suddenly felt, all this seems to be different from the plot in my memory. Chapter 119, pulled by the frozen die lion. The burly man Cecil, the devil of disaster. Die lion pulls. Gray gasped heavily. His eyes were fixed on the huge body in front of him. What planted demon? Natsu asked, taken aback. It's a disaster, Happy reminded him. Gray didn't argue with Natsu, as usual. He secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It's obviously cold all around, but at this moment, there was still sweat on Gray's forehead. It's exactly the same as back then. What's going on? There was a sudden sound of footsteps behind everyone. How to do? Are you going to make a move? Urzamira Jane looked at Luo Xingchen at the same time. Hide first and listen to see if you can find any information. Luo Xingchen made a decisive decision. After all, Dai Lion pulls down the magic circle depicted below. Luo Xingchen felt something was wrong. Luo Xingchen knew about the magic of Moondrop in the guild's database. Although not comprehensive, but the Moondrop itself is not too difficult magic. It is only rare if there are too many specific conditions required. And the complexity of the magic circle under Dai Lion pulls. It is no exaggeration. It is one of the most complicated magic circles Luo Xingchen has ever seen. Even more complicated than the forbidden magic purgatory shatter. Therefore, when the intelligence is not inquired clearly, better not reveal it. Several people nodded. Immediately hid behind a stone not far away. The voice just now seems to be coming from this side. 35 soon. 4 figures came to die, Lionra. Among them, a blue-haired figure named Yuka, dressed in green clothes, looked around and said, "Ooh." The other one, with a topless upper body and a collar, the man with a pair of dog ears on his head, covered himself and whimpered. I said, "Toby, did you irradiate the Moondrop? You almost turned into a dog." Yuka laughed. "I don't have it. It's decoration, decoration." Toby pointed to his ear angrily and shouted. I said, "You guys stop arguing here. It seems that someone has been here, so be vigilant." 99 beside the two, a head of pink hair, in a double ponytail, a woman named Sharia. Looking at the dilapidated ruins on the ground, he said, "But there's no one here." Toby kept twitching his nose. "You're not a real dog, can you smell it?" Yuka complained. "You care about me?" Toka shouted and expressed his opinion. Also, the building itself is so dilapidated. Maybe it's just because the ground has aged and fallen off? Okay, stop arguing. Just as the 3 were arguing, standing at the forefront, the silent figure spoke up. He turned around and looked down at the 3 of them with a man who was much taller than the 3 of them. Strong muscles tightened all his clothes, outlined that explosive outline. Beneath the khaki hair is a face full of grimness. Although no one who invaded was found, what happened to Dai Lion cannot be revealed. He looked at the 3 people in front of him and said in a deep voice, "What do you want to say?" Cecil. Yuka looked directly at the strong man in front of him. "There is no fear because of the huge size. I said 2 days ago when I came here, that group of people in the village should never be alive, otherwise it will definitely be exposed here, but you don't listen." Cecil said in a deep voice, slowly turned around and looked at Dai Lionra in front of him. An imperceptible excitement flashed in his eyes, and he said, "According to estimates, under the effect of the blessing of the magic circle, the injection of the Moondrop is almost saturated, and it can be accumulated tonight or tomorrow night. That is to say, there is absolutely no room for error during this period, so I suggest that that group of people be completely wiped out." "What are you talking about? Those people have nothing to do with us." 33 Sharia frowned. "So what?" Cecil looked at Sharia, loudly said, "Did you think you were playing the house? If something goes wrong, we just lose everything. Do you understand?" Yuka interrupted Cecil's words with a wave and said, "No matter what, we only follow Emperor Zero's orders and let him make a decision." Cecil squinted slightly. It seemed that even the sound of breathing had begun to become heavy. After a while, he slowly smiled. "Of course, we're all guided by Lord Zero. I just expressed my own suggestion. 5. I will specifically go to Lord Zero and talk about it. Just to remind you, Lord Zero won't be back until evening," Sharius said. "It doesn't matter. I'll just talk at night." Cecil's voice fell, and he turned and walked towards the outside world. "Whatever you want." Yuka waved his hand, ignoring Cecil. Several people just watched Cecil leave. "Really, this guy looks like a guy who doesn't love." Sharia pouted. "It's what it is." Toby chimed in. "Forget it. Don't worry about that guy, although it came later, but it also has the same purpose." Yuka made a round. His eyes looked at the ruins that fell on the ground. Yuka says, "Let's just walk around somewhere else to see if there are really intruders. 5. It will be evening in a short time, and the ceremony will begin at that time. What? Isn't it faster for them to catch them and ask them clearly?" 99. After a few people left, Natsu asked angrily at Urza beside him, "Don't be impulsive. Didn't they say it? That guy named Zero Emperor hasn't come back." 55. If you act now, you'll have to startle the snake. Urza explained. "This time, I rarely agree with what the armored woman said." Mira Jane beside her said, "According to what they said in the evening, what kind of ceremony will be held, and then it will be wiped out." Luo Xingchen on the side looked at the pothole above Dai Lion. "Here is the cavity reserved for the drop of the moon to shine onto Dai Lionra, so you can see the outside sky from here." After estimating the time, Luo Xingchen said, "There's still about an hour left. Everyone, let's take a rest. Maybe we will fight later." 55. After explaining, Luo Xingchen found a boulder and sat down on the spot. His thoughts seemed to return to the scene just now. That burly man named Cecil, the man who never appeared in his memory. Who is it? Things always feel more and more complicated. However, it is also more challenging. "Okay." Lucy nodded after hearing Luo Xingchen's words. "No way. An hour is really hard." Natsu pouted and complained. "Love." Appy agreed with Natsu. Only Gray, his eyebrows, Zhao Zhao, did not relax for the first moment. With sweat running down his cheeks, he stared at Dai Lion, who was in front of him. "These guys, how the hell did Dai Lion pull in here?" Having said that, Gray shook his head again. It should be said, how did they find the place where the seal was? The sealed place. Lucy wondered. Dai Lionra was originally sealed in the iceberg of the northern continent. $% 1 carat $1 carat. It's the undead demon that continued to riot in the Isbin area 10 years ago. Gray's words got lower and lower. At the same time, he's also the master who taught me magic. Ulu, the devil who sealed his life. Tightly clenched fists, Gray continued. Although I don't know what this demon has to do with the curse of this island, this demon should never be here. 5. The so-called Zero Emperor. Who is he? A chilling air erupted from Gray's body. At this moment, Gray let out an unprecedented roar. "Library. If you want to tarnish Ulu's reputation, I will never bypass him." Chapter 120. I didn't cry. Time passed by minute. To cope with the boring time, Lucy summoned the celestial spirit of Lyra. Although it is not a celestial spirit dedicated to combat, it has a set in other aspects. Like singing, it should be said that it is worthy of the celestial spirit of Lyra when she fluctuates the strings. It can be clearly felt. It was as if a pair of gentle hands were stroking people's hearts. The scene seemed to be quiet, and only Lyra's beautiful singing remained. Gray sat alone in front of Dai Lionra. Looking at the blue ice crystals in front of him, he was stunned. The melodious singing seemed to bring Gray to the back of his mind. It was an icy place. The night was dyed red by the flames of war, and there were countless ruins on the broken earth. Young Gray seeks revenge on Lion, the culprit who destroyed his home. Ignoring the advice of my master Ulu, found Dai Lion without authorization, but Gray, who was young and didn't even master magic. How could it be Dai Lion's opponent? That's when his master Ulu arrived. As the strongest magician in the northern part of the continent at that time, Ulu, in order to protect her disciple, she chose to fight with Dai Lionra. The terrifying fight took Ulu's leg. But even so, it cannot end Dai Lion. With his life at stake, Ulu makes a decision. At that time, 707 Gray watched helplessly, watching his master walk towards the devil step by step. The figure that he had always despised was so tall at this moment. Even compared to the monsters in front of him, it is not too much. It is absolutely impossible for you to hurt my lovely apprentices. Monster 5 Ulu crossed his hands in front of him, one up and the other down. Substantial magic power turned into snow-white ice crystals. A huge magic circle spread out around the demon. At the same time as the cold air continued to pour out, cracks appeared on Ulu's body. At that time, Gray stretched out his palm, frantically trying to stop his master's actions. But to no avail. The cracks are constantly expanding, and it seems to be so painful. But Ulu still showed a smile. That's because of the smiles that people who have protected those they want to protect will show. That is the smile that only protects the future of his apprentice. Gray, shape magic is the magic of freedom, and when you really find your shape, you will be indestructible. After using absolute ice, it does not mean that I will die, but will become ice and live forever. Don't grieve for me. Move forward. Move into the future. She turned into ice crystals all over the sky. He kept flying towards the huge demon that Dai Lion pulled. The darkness in your heart. Let me seal it. This sentence has been with Gray until now. She gritted her teeth, tears oozing from the corners of her eyes. Ulu, he involuntarily let out a trembling voice. Suddenly, Lyra's singing stopped. Gray, Lucy asked softly. Oh, Gray said without looking back. You're crying. Happy whispered. It's true that Lyra is good at singing people's hearts out, but Lucy muttered. Gray actually cried. Happy looked at the trembling back. Some are not taste. I didn't cry. Gray responded stubbornly. Putting a hand on Gray's shoulder, Luo Xingchen said slowly, Your master? What an amazing wizard. Gray was stunned for a moment, then lowered his head slightly. She is the best teacher in the world. Patted Gray on the shoulder. Luo Xingchen didn't say much, stood up and looked up. The originally bright sky also dimmed at this moment. I can already see the moon. Gray wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. He stood up and looked up at the sky. Rumbling. At this moment, the surroundings began to vibrate violently. Above the sky, there are constantly stones falling from above. Purple light began to spill from the pothole above. The next moment, several purple magic circles unfolded one after another in midair. Gather the light into a thick beam of light. It shone straight on Dai Lion's body. Up. Lucy quickly stood up. Even Nat Su, who was already asleep, came to his senses in an instant. Surprised. A purple light shot down. This purple light? Is it moonlight? Gray exclaimed. Is this what those guys are talking about today? CCBB. Urza rubbed his chin and murmured. The drop of the magic moon. Luo Xingchen said while watching the sky. The condensed moonlight has the ability to crack any magic. What? Heard Luo Xingchen's words. Gray suddenly shouted. That is to say, yes, in principle, even the absolute ice that your master condenses with his life will be dissolved by the drop of the moon. Luo Xingchen looked at Gray and explained. What a joke. Gray shook his head in disbelief. Those guys don't understand the horror of Dai Lion, those guys. Mira Jane interrupted Gray's words and said, Don't talk about that. The light is falling from above. Hurry up and have a look. 35, come on, go up and have a look. Luo Xingchen turned around and walked straight to the stairs in front of him. The crowd followed suit. After crossing the long stairs, everyone came to the top of the ruins. A series of magic circles spread out above the ruins. Countless moonlight was condensed into purple beams, which shot directly to the hole at the top of the ruins. Near the entrance of the cave, countless masked figures formed a circle. Unexplained incantations came out of their mouths. Except for the crowd around the pothole. There were 7 people standing beside them, watching all this while talking aloud. The figure in the middle is wearing a white cloak, and the helmet of the armor wraps his eyes. 2 horns protrude from the top of the helmet. According to the conversation of these people, this person is the so-called Zero Emperor. On the side are Sharia, Yucca, and Toby, whom I met today, and Cecil, the burly, khaki-haired man. The other two, looking at the costumes, should be a swordsman and a person who can't tell the depth. Isn't Dai Lionra at the point where he can recover? 35 looked at the ritual in front of him. Emperor Zero asked aloud. Looking at the progress, it's today or tomorrow. Yuka replied, what the hell is that day? Toby yelled. Cecil on the side frowned slightly, but didn't say much. At this moment, the corner of Emperor Ling's mouth raised an excited smile. Speak in a low voice. Very well, the day is finally here. Turning his head to look at Cecil, he said, regarding the intruder, I don't want anyone to interfere with us. Yeah, except for the surrounding villages, there are no other people on this small island. Cecil replied, looking at Emperor Ling, so, Lord Ling, what is your decision? 35 Emperor Zero did not hesitate, just wave his arms. If that's the case, then kill them. Although, I don't like killing, but for my ideals, it is necessary to sacrifice some people. 55 Cecil smiled slightly. Emperor Zero looked aside and said slowly, then, I'll leave it to you, Sarah, Owen. The figure with the sharp sword in his hand bowed slightly. Don't worry. Leave it to us, Lord Lingdi. Damn it. Don't try to get it. At this moment, Natsu's roar came from behind Zero Emperor, attracted everyone's attention. They all looked in the direction from which the voice came, where Luo Xingchen and others standing upright. The battle seems to be about to begin in the next moment. Chapter 121 The battle unfolds. Dragon Slayer? Magical power began to gather in Natsu's mouth. Cheeks swelled up. Natsu opened his mouth abruptly towards the crowd in front of him. The person who came to ruin your good deeds, it's me. The flames shot out. The sturdy flames that turned into a frenzy went straight to the people in front of them. Cecil's eyes narrowed slightly, and he raised his arm directly. Immediately, in the empty distance between the few people, a stone wall that suddenly rose across the middle. The next moment, the flames slammed into the stone wall, caused a violent explosion. After a long time, the smoke dissipated, leaving only black stones that were scorched on the ground. You guy, he looked at the burly man in front of him. His nose moved, strange, this feeling. What's wrong? Natsu asked Happy beside him. It's just that this guy smells a little weird. Natsu frowned. After thinking for a long time, Natsu spread his hands helplessly. But I can't remember it for a while. Since I can't remember, let's talk about it later. Let's fight. Luo Xingchen interrupted Natsu's thinking. Looking at the people on the opposite side, they said slowly, prepare to do it and deal with everyone here. Calm words speak of unwavering determination. That crest. Looking at Natsu's exposed right arm crest, Sharia was stunned, then said, it's for fairy tale. So it turns out, it seems that the people from that village issued a mission to the guild. The calm Yuka immediately analyzed it. Emperor Zero didn't speak, but looked at Sarah and Iwan beside him. As if comprehending, the two turned and walked away. Hey, what are those two guys going to do? Gray roared suddenly. Don't you know? It was to destroy that village. Emperor Zero responded. Raise the arm under the cloak and squeeze it tightly. Those who hinder us and those who plan sabotage will all be wiped out. What did you say? Natsu suddenly got angry and rushed out towards the crowd in front of him. UBD, Gray's forehead also burst into blue veins, shouting to the people behind him. That guy Zero Emperor belongs to me. Are you okay? Luo Xingchen asked. Don't worry, leave it to me. Gray responded loudly, then ripped off his clothes. He rushed towards Emperor Zero. Urza, Mila, please stop the two guys who just left. I'll leave it here, Luo Xingchen said to the two of them. Understood, you have to be careful. Urza nodded slightly. The blade appeared in her hand. I'm enough alone. Urza doesn't need to go. Mira Jane rubbed her wrists. It should be enough to say that I am alone. You better stay and watch the show. Urza replied, not to be outdone. See how you're beaten? Hard woman. I'm going to be defeated? Even you are my defeat. Okay? A woman with a belly button. BD Urza. BD Mira Jane. 99 fat pig. 4 eyes. Luo Xingchen put his hands on his hips, rested his forehead with one hand, and took a deep breath. Speaking of which, if you don't want me to chase, you can stay here. Everyone is about to run away. Luo Xingchen pointed to the 2 black dots in front of him. Then how can you, Xingchen, just stay here, leave that guy to me? The 2 spoke in unison. Then they looked at each other again. Cut. I'm looking for you to settle accounts later. Urza. FK you up after that. Mira Jane. 35 after each said a cruel word. The 2 immediately burst into flames, chasing towards the distance. Shaking his head, Luo Xingchen looked at Lucy and Happy. Self-defense should be fine, right? Hearing the question, Lucy and Happy nodded quickly. Then you can act freely and hit whomever you think you can beat. Oh, okay. Lucy nodded. Ignoring Lucy, Luo Xingchen took a step forward. Seemingly seeing the rear, the remaining 2 also moved. Emperor looked at Yuka and Toby and Sharia next to him. The 2 guys and a cat will be handed over to you. I see, Lord Zero. Yuka nodded slightly. I'm going to hiss him to pieces. Toby yelled excitedly. Then leave that woman to me. Sharia's eyes were fixed on Lucy. Just when a few people were talking. Gray was already approaching a few people, his fists against his waist. The cold air immediately began to diffuse out. This kind of boring ritual is absolutely impossible for you to succeed. With a roar, Gray jumped high. The corners of the mouth under the mask of Emperor Zero slowly rose. This guy belongs to me. The right hand under the hood lifted the magic circle and unfolded at this moment. Immediately afterwards, pure white ice crystals condensed out in an instant. Above the ice crystals, countless sharp ice edges seemed to pierce Gray in the air. Not to be outdone, Gray pushed forward with his clasped hands. The same magic, the same ice crystals spread out. The next moment, the ice of the 2 people intertwined in the air. The chill that kept pouring out made everyone present, except Luo Xingchen, felt the chill. The ice is constantly fighting. As the 2 continued to exert their strength, they finally shattered. With the shattered ice crystals, Gray fell in front of Emperor Zero. Staring at the figure in front of him, Gray roared, Leon, do you know what you were doing? A long time no see, Gray. Leon also said. The voice of the 2 talking made Lucy froze behind him. Huh? They know each other. Lucy looked puzzled. I don't know. Happy shook his head. You guys hurry up and deal with the ones at the back. This guy is enough for me alone. Leon shouted to the Yukas behind him. Toby, let's go. Yuka said to Toby. Understood. Toby showed his claws. Take the lead and head straight for Luo Xingchen. Beside, Natsu's charge met an obstacle. The ground beneath Natsu's feet, who was running fast, burst open. Immediately afterwards, a hard and huge clod flew up. Hit Natsu. Damn it. Natsu reacted in an instant. Stepping on the collapsed stone, he jumped out suddenly, jumped towards the distance, dodging the blow. His eyes were fixed on the burly figure standing in front of him. UBD, get out of the way. Natsu shouted with blue veins on his head. This place is not where you should be, kid. Cecil's mouth slowly evoked a smile and said slowly, I don't care anywhere. Get out of the way. Natsu's hands gathered in flames, when he even rushed towards Cecil. Fire dragons. Natsu clenched his fists and stopped in front of Cecil. Then the fist fell with a bang. Tekken. Facing Natsu's attack, Cecil's face did not show any fluctuations. Fire dragon. He raised his eyebrows. An unintelligible smile twitched at the corners of his mouth. A root of blue veins burst out from his sturdy arm. He then fired directly at Natsu. Earth dragons. Bang fist. Next second, fist and fist collided in midair. Magic and magic are also fighting at this moment. What? The sharp pain in his arm made Natsu's eyes widen instantly. But what surprised Natsu even more was Cecil's magic. Is this guy Dragon Slayer too? Natsu let out a horrified voice. The 2 hit points. So, it is this taste, is the taste of dragons. 35, it was only at this time that Natsu reacted. Why does the smell of the figure in front make Natsu feel so strange? Hello. Natsu stepped forward. Are you a dragon slayer too? Is your magic also taught by dragons? Natsu asked loudly. Dragon. Cecil smiled disdainfully. What are you guys talking about? I am indeed the Dragon Slayer, but dragons are something you better stop joking. He wrapped his arms around B. Chapter 122 Luo Xingchen. Well, let me deal with it, Dragon Slayer Crystal. There was doubt in Natsu's eyes. Although Luo Xingchen, who is also in the guild, can also destroy dragon magic. However, Natsu had also questioned him once. Was it also taught by dragons? In this regard, Luo Xingchen's answer was no. According to his answer, Luo Xingchen himself can't be counted as Dragon Slayer. As for the details, Natsu didn't ask or didn't understand. He only knew that Luo Xingchen couldn't be measured by ordinary people's standards. Are you an idiot? Cecil shook his head. What did you say? 35 Natsu clenched his fists, and the flames became more violent. I don't even know the Dragon Slayer crystal. How did your Dragon Slayer magic come from? Cecil sneered disdainfully. Of course Igneel taught it to me. It's a real fire dragon. Natsu retorted loudly. A real dragon? Don't joke, after all. That kind of thing is just a relic of the old times. Cecil slowly spread out his hands. And my dragon-slaying magic is a precious magic crystal that can make people learn dragon-slaying magic. And my dragon-slaying magic is 707 obtained from the magic crystal. What did you say? Natsu gritted his teeth. The anger in my heart was completely ignited. Igneel is not some old relic. 35, it's real, it's mine, father. 35, faced with Natsu's angry growl, Cecil was unmoved. It seems that you're really stupid to believe such boring words. BD. Natsu couldn't hold back his anger any longer. The flames burned all over the body. He attacked Cecil. Did you know? There can be no room for two dragons under the same sky. Cecil said slowly, when dragons meet dragons, it is a never-ending battle. 35, until one party is completely destroyed. Magical power began to flow out of Cecil's body. The ground around him seemed to answer his call, started to tremble. He opened his mouth slightly, and the strangers gathered in the middle of him. Earth Dragons roar. 99, a khaki magic circle spread out in front of him. Immediately afterwards, Natsu, who was rushing in, was completely enveloped by the breath of Shashua, which was wrapped in countless clods. Ugh! Under Cecil's gaze, Natsu let out a scream in his breath. The body was torn apart by many clods and sands. Blood was sprayed out at this moment. It seems that the fire dragon is about to fall today. Cecil's mouth raised a smile. Who will fall? In the breath, Natsu let out a deafening roar. Igneel never fell. He's been waiting for me somewhere, waiting for me to find him. The fiery flames began to skyrocket wildly. All the matter surrounding Natsu was shaken by the skyrocketing flames at this moment. After breaking free, Natsu stomped the ground. The whole person approached Cecil at an extremely fast speed. Before he could react, the clenched fist slammed directly on his cheek. Puff! With a look of horror, Cecil, who had not yet reacted, flew out directly. He slammed into the high wall standing behind him. Boom! The high wall shattered, and the falling debris buried Cecil in it. On the spot, Natsu still kept his punching posture. There was a smile on his grim face, and he gasped for breath. Looks like you're not too bad. Click, click. This is the sound of stones being moved. Cecil, who was buried in the rubble, slowly stood up. The burly body was covered with dust. A trace of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Slowly raising his hand, wiping the corner of his mouth, Cecil glared at Natsu. It seems that you have quite a set. Fire dragon. He tilted his head and spat out a cloud of blood from his mouth. Cecil looked at Natsu again. I admit, I underestimated you before. But he clenched his fists, and the magic within his body burst out. Shouted, no more. I'll let you know what a gap is. 35 not to be outdone, Natsu raised his arm and hooked his palm. Just in my mind, come on, BD. The top of the ruins is huge. Therefore, it is enough to provide enough space for a few people around who are fighting. Originally because Gray insisted on fighting with Leon. Therefore, Luo Xingchen intends to settle the guy who was fighting with Natsu first. Not enough, his movement was stopped by two people. With his hands on his back, Yuka stood straight in front of Luo Xingchen. Beside it, there is a fierce face and constantly waving the claws in his hands to demonstrate the kobold Toby. I won't let you pass here. Yuka lowered her eyebrows slightly and said. Toby yelled, so you two came to stop me. Luo Xingchen stopped. With one hand on his hip, he glanced at the two people in front of him. Have you been underestimated? Yuka shook his head. He then said, we were once mages who belonged to a well-known guild. Compared to fairy tale, it's not that much better. We're not the kind of people who can be settled so easily. He raised his head and looked straight at the figure in front of him with confident eyes. Said, the Sorcerer's Guild, Lamia Scale. Have you heard of it? It's the guild that Jura of Await is in. Toby agreed. Jura? So you are Jura's junior, right? 35 Luo Xingchen put one hand on his neck. It shook for a while and made a click sound. But what does that have to do with me? The voice fell, and he raised his arms towards the two people on the opposite side. I don't care who you are. Don't get in the way. 99, UBD. Yuka frowned and was about to start brush. The cold air was madly filling the surroundings. Yukana's hands that hadn't been raised just stayed in midair, unable to move. Even Yuka, who was about to charge, was turned into ice crystals. There is no option to kill them outright. After all, in the original book, these guys are not some heinous people. Just a few wanting revenge, the poor man who pinned his hopes on Leon. The second floor of the ruins. Two figures appeared here. One of them, holding a crystal ball, was covered by a strange mask. The dog hugged his back, and the whole person looked like a middle-aged man. He is a man called Zerit. At the same time, he also serves as Leon's staff. The other, with a wand in his hand, was covered in a cloak. Only a pair of eyes with a few wrinkles at the corners of their eyes remained. Hagrid, does your presence here mean that everything is ready? Zerit looked at the man in the cloak and said, don't worry, Lord Zerit. Although it took a lot of time to bring the thing back and set up the magic circle, it finally caught up before Lionra recovered. The man called Hagrid said softly. But he raised his head. It seemed that the battle on the top floor could be seen through the ceiling. Shun Sheng said, it's about an hour before the absolute ice melts. But there were intruders up there, even the fairy tale guys. 55 among them. Luo Xingchen is also there. What should I do? The eyes under Zerit's mask narrowed slightly. Luo Xingchen is indeed a big trouble. To be honest, I never thought that this guy would come. After pondering for a moment, he spoke again. Is your son up there too? 1.1 Hagrid explained. Cecile seems to be fighting that dragon. Zerit nodded and continued. In short, no matter what, they can't let them stop Lion's resurrection, so he slowly raised his hands. A complex and magnificent magic circle spread out on his palm and keeps spinning, corrupt, with a soft murmur, above the heads of Zerit and Hagrid. The ceiling began to break down gradually, and then countless rubble began to turn into dust. It fell to the ground in front of the two of them. The magic circle continued, and the rotten ceiling began to spread wildly. At the same time, everyone at the top noticed this strange phenomenon. The ground is decreasing. Lucy dodged Sheria's attack with difficulty, shouting. Below, the corner of Zerit's mouth turned even brighter. Let me deal with that person named Luo Xingchen. You're responsible for looking after the magic circle here. 5. Don't let those guys completely destroy it. Understood. Hagrid responded. Chapter 123, Ursha. Rumbling the ground was disintegrating, and there was an overwhelmed scream. Look at everything around you. Leon frowned slightly, apparently realizing something. Zerit, did you shoot? He looked at the rotten ground and murmured. But don't ruin my fight with Gray. 35, the voice just fell. It seems to understand Leon's mind, except for a small area where Leon and Gray are. The remaining locations directly suffered massive collapses. The sudden weightlessness made Natsu, Lucy, and even Luo Xingchen inevitably fall downward. Ugh, what happened? Love, Natsu fighting Cecil, and Lucy, who was fighting Sheria, exclaimed. They all fell towards the bottom of the ruins. The entire ruin has 4 floors, except for the top floor, where everyone just fought. It was the second floor where Xerath and Hagrid stood. Below is the first floor where Luo Xingchen and others entered the temple before. Finally, there is the basement floor where Dai Lion is stored. Bang, bang, bang. Several crisp sounds resounded on the second floor of the ruins. Luo Xingchen touched the ground with both feet, squatted down at 22, and landed smoothly. Lucy's screams came from up high. Luo Xingchen raised his head, stretched out his hands without hesitation, and firmly caught Lucy's falling body. It's just in the form of a princess hugging. At the back, Happy landed with his head upright and made a muffled sound. Why no one catches us? The star-eyed Happy complained. He stood up and shook, and then fell straight down. Sorry, Happy. The two of you are a little far apart, and it's too late. Luo Xingchen shrugged helplessly. He put down Lucy, who was blushing inexplicably, and looked not far away, where Natsu and Cecil hit the ground and tangled with each other. A puff of smoke kicked up. Stars! Natsu and Lucy Happy, you guys. Watching his companions all fall towards the ruins, Gray suddenly exclaimed and looked over there. You better worry about yourself first, Gray. Leon's voice came from behind. The next moment, white ice crystals began to spread around. In just a moment, Gray's feet were covered in ice crystals. The ice crystals that passed by rose up around Gray and finally closed. Wrap both Gray and Leon. An airtight ice space was formed. Gray, there are only two of us left here. Let me take a look and see how you have grown over the years. Leon watched Gray speak slowly. UBD, don't act like a senior brother for me. Gray clenched his fists tightly, glancing at Leon. You are no longer a disciple of Ulu. Facing Gray's roar, Leon's mood didn't change. Shaking his head gently, he took off his mask, revealing his silver-white hair. And with a handsome face, he said, Aren't you the same? Because Ulu was no longer in this world. 35, she sacrificed her life to seal Dai Lion. Gray retorted loudly. What you are doing is destroying Ulu's hard work. The smile on Leon's face gradually disappeared. Speak slowly. It's a shame you dare to say such a thing. Don't forget that Ulu was killed by you. If you hadn't been arrogant to challenge Dai Lionra, how could she have? Leon's brows furrowed. You dare to mention her name now? He raised his arm sharply. The spreading chill turned into solid ice and slammed into Gray's abdomen. The huge force directly knocked it flying and hit the wall where the ice was frozen. Gray covered his stomach in pain, slowly stood up from the ground and said loudly, Leon, I will never let you succeed. Just right. We haven't played against each other for a long time, Gray. Leon raised his arm again, and the pervading chill was Gray's response. The second floor of the ruins. The smoke and dust caused by the falling of the crowd has dissipated. The two dragons, Natsu and Cecil, who have not yet been separated from each other, start a battle in Zaidu. And Luo Xingchen ignored Natsu. Instead, he turned his attention to two mysterious people, one tall and one short, not far away. The magic of time, that guy should be Ursha. He didn't care about the tall man in black robe. Luo Xingchen's eyes were locked on Xerath. Facing Luo Xingchen's gaze, Xerath slowly raised a smile. He turned to look at Hagrid beside him and said, You go to guard the underground first and arrange for the people of your guild to continue the ceremony. I will deal with this guy. Yes. Hagrid nodded respectfully, glancing at Cecil, who was fighting with Natsu. Then he turned and walked towards the ground. Squinting slightly, Luo Xingchen looked at Lucy. Happy, will be taken care of by you. I'll deal with that guy first. Leave me alone. Lucy pointed to himself in disbelief. Luo Xingchen was about to say something. He stopped immediately and grabbed Lucy's shoulder. Dodged to the side. Next moment, boom dash. With a loud roar, Giant rocked Giant. Waving a giant fist, he landed on the spot where Luo Xingchen and Lucy were standing just now. There was a flurry of rubble flying. This magic Isheria, 35 Lucy, who was pulled away by Luo Xingchen, recognized it immediately. This was the magic of Sheria who had just fought her, capable of manipulating puppet magic. Can manipulate all non-human objects to attack. He looked at the pink-haired woman who was riding a rock giant. Luo Xingchen stood up slowly. Is that the guy who talks about love all the time? 5, that's it. Lucy nodded. In the brief time the two of them were talking, Sharia pointed at the people in front of them again. Signaled the rock giant under his feet to attack. The rock giant also responded at this moment. The clenched huge fist was raised high and smashed directly at the ants in front of him. And the crises that are coming don't stop there. Hoof, hoof, hoof. It was the sound of rapid air breaking from behind the two of them. Sensing something was wrong, Lucy turned around. Suddenly, his eyes widened, because behind him, the crystal ball in the sky is flying towards this side at an ultra-fast speed. Stars! Back! Lucy yelled, reminding. Squat down. 35. What's 710 minus 35? Although he didn't quite understand, Lucy still held his head and squatted down. Immediately afterwards, Luo Xingchen's arm swung out horizontally. All of a sudden, the magic power turned into cold air and exploded, spreading wildly around in a semicircle. The fist that the rock giant swung down stayed in the air, unable to advance an inch. Was directly turned into an ice sculpture. Not even Sharia standing on the rock giant's back was spared. The countless crystal balls galloping towards this side are also under this terrifying cold air. It was as if all motivation had been lost. The white ice crystals cling to the crystal ball and then spread in the air. Connected to other crystal balls, just for a moment. The crystal balls in midair condensed into a hole, fall to the ground. He slowly let out a cold breath. Luo Xingchen looked at Zerit, and at this moment, Zerit's eyes also turned to this side. The eyes of the two collided in midair. Pop, pop, pop. Zerit clapped his hands first, breaking the brief silence. As expected of one of fairy tale's trump cards, almost no one here is your opponent. Zerit spoke softly. Luo Xingchen's expression did not change because of the praise from the enemy. He tilted his head slightly and said, You are different from them. Don't you plan to show your true face? Commentator Ursha, that voice with 100% certainty, the smile that Zerit had just maintained disappeared completely. Sure enough, if it's you, it's absolutely impossible to hide. Zerit, no. Ursha shook her head helplessly. Chapter 124, The Darkness Shrouding Galena Island. Xingchen, could it be that? You know this person? Lucy looked at Luo Xingchen suspiciously. After all, I've seen many faces. Luo Xingchen replied, Yeah, I have a very deep memory of Lord Xingchen. Ursha spoke slowly. Something seemed to come to mind, adding, However, the one standing here now is a man named Zalit, not as Erdia. It doesn't matter. As long as you stand in front of you, you are the enemy, and there is nothing to say about the enemy. 99 Luo Xingchen spread out his hands indifferently. That's right. Ursha nodded lightly. Said, Although your opponent is you, I will do my best to stop it. Lucy, stay away. Luo Xingchen said softly. Lucy also understands that standing here may drag Luo Xingchen down. Quickly hide away with happy. Please forgive me for showing this face for a while. The crystal ball flew out of Ursha's hands, flying towards Luo Xingchen at an astonishing speed. The fist collided with the crystal ball, and without any accident, the crystal ball shattered directly. It turned into a shattered crystal and fell around. Not caring about the broken crystal on the ground, Luo Xingchen kept walking, heading straight for Ursha. Ursha, disguised as a small old man, did not panic. The smile on his face remained the same, and the raised palm gently hooked. The shattered crystal was restored to its original state and attacked the back of Luo Xingchen, who was advancing. Seemingly aware of the threat behind him, Luo Xingchen leaped high as he stepped on the ground, dodged the impact of the crystal ball. Ursha put her fingers together, pointing up. The crystal ball seemed to have received some kind of order and shot towards Luo Xingchen above. The chill spreads instantly. The surrounding temperature began to drop wildly at an alarming rate. The moisture in the air condensed into ice crystals, completely freezing the galloping crystal ball inside. If it's ice, it's useless to me. Ursha waved her hands, and a pure white magic circle bloomed. Arc of Time Future. 35. As Ursha's voice fell, The ice that was frozen in the air seemed to be affected by a strange force. Begin moving towards the ending where the future is melted. Ursha frowned. What's the matter? The consumption of mana. Unexpectedly large. That's right, the magic of ice, Ursha herself. But under the action of the arc of time, the hard ice will enter into a future where it will melt and be evaporated. In front of him, he was only dealing with ice crystals that appeared in mid-air with additional time magic. It made Ursha feel the crazy flow of magic power. The reason for the dragon slayer magic? A thought came to mind. At this moment, above the sky, Luo Xingchen was not surprised by the melting of the ice. Lost magic, arc of time, whether it is in the past life or understanding in this life. Can understand. This magic has the terrifying effect of revealing the past and future of objects. The golden badge appeared in his hands again. A sharp shot forward. The azure blue magic circle unfolded, and Luo Xingchen, who jumped high, also passed through the magic circle directly. In the next moment, the chill that had filled his surroundings completely transformed into a jumping electric light, constantly surging. This guy, looking at this scene, Ursha was stunned, but immediately reacted. Sure enough, since you want to stop Lord Xingchen, you won't lose if you don't use all your strength. 35. The palm waved again. The crystal ball that was freed from the ice and frozen quickly flew towards Luo Xingchen. Halfway through, the crystal ball is divided into 2 parts, and the 2 parts are divided into 4 parts, increasing continuously. Future flash. Ursha slammed her hands to the ground. Immediately, countless crystal balls radiated dazzling light. Immediately afterwards, countless beams shot out from the crystal ball. Like an intertwined net, Luo Xingchen was completely shrouded. The frequency of the blue arc flashing became faster. Brought by Yolei's Dragon Slayer magic, it's not just a violent attack that ordinary people can't match. And that super speed that surpasses most magic. That is a super speed comparable to the thunder. Lightning enveloped Luo Xingchen's entire body. Boom! It fell with a deafening roar. The beams emitted by the magic crystal all fell into the void, like a thunder that fell from the sky. Before Ursha could react, the thunder and lightning slammed directly on her transformed short body. Puff! Ursha's mouth gaped at the violent force. Blood was mixed with cries of pain. In the thunder and lightning, an arm stretched out and directly pinched her neck. Press Ursha directly to the ground. The cracks started to spread like crazy. The roaring thunder and lightning continued to rage around. It seems that in a very short period of time, the bearing capacity of the ground has reached a critical point. Boom, one by one. With the terrifying sound of collapse, the ground collapsed again. Just one blow penetrated Luo Xingchen on the 2nd floor of the ruins, landed on the 1st floor with Ursha. Click, click. The gravel kept falling from the top of the head to the ground. In the smoke and dust, Luo Xingchen stood up straight. He looked at Ursha, who had just climbed up not far ahead. What an astonishing power. Breathing heavily, Ursha's whole body was still a little paralyzed. So much so that even the way of standing seems a bit weird. The magic power poured out again. Come on, you must know that I am not weak. Before wearing lion, the little girl must stop you. Luo Xingchen did not speak. It's just that the lightning flashing around seems to be more violent. Outside the ruins, Sarah and Iwan, who had just been ordered to go to the village to carry out the mission of destruction, were stopped. Several sharp swords slashed over the 2 of them. It landed in front of them, forcing the 2 to stop. Turning her head, Mira Jane, who received Satan's soul, fanned the wings of the devil, suspended in front of them. You don't want to escape. 35. Mira Jane raised the demon's claws. Crimson lips twitched slowly. The 2 turned around again. Then I saw Urza, dressed in the armor of the family, slowly descending from the sky, stepping on the sharp sword inserted on the ground, on the hilt. Enlightenment. Urza pointed his sword at the 2. A judgment-like declaration was issued. At 2 women, Sarah, who was carrying a long sword, looked around. Disdainful mouth. BD, are you underestimating us? Mira Jane frowned. The magic began to surge, and Mira Jane planned to teach these two guys a lesson. And many more. Suddenly, Urza's voice, Zhao does, interrupted Mira Jane's movements. What's wrong? Armored girl, Mira Jane asked impatiently. They're not easy. Urza didn't care about Mira Jane's name at the moment. He looked at the black skull mark on Sarah's neck. Shun Sheng asked, You are the ghosts of the corpse of the Dark Guild? Sarah, who was asked, was slightly taken aback, then smiled. Looks like I should choose to cover my neck. He raised his arms. However, it doesn't matter. Anyway, there is only a countdown to the last time until the task is completed. It doesn't matter if it's exposed. He looked at a silent Iwan and saw him nodding. Keep talking. That's right. We are the ghosts of the corpse, under the banner of the Devil's Heart, and the strongest dark guild among the many affiliated guilds. The corners of her mouth slowly raised a smile, and Sarah said coldly, And we are also two of the three strongest combat powers in the guild. So, in the face of such combat power, do you think you can stop it? Chapter 125 Wind, Sand, Maiden, Calamity, and Roar the strongest. Urza and Mira Jane glanced at each other. Unfortunately, among Fairy Tale, we are also known as one of the strongest candidates. 99 Mira Jane raised her paw with a proud smile on her face. It doesn't matter, let's go together. Sarung took off the long sword that was on his back. Magical power begins to flow out of the body. His eyes were fixed on the two people in front of him, ready to go. I was underestimated. Mira Jane narrowed her eyes slightly. Unhappy was written all over his face. Be careful, Mila. Urza didn't care. Instead, he looked at the man named AI, one who had been silent. Brush. Suddenly, the sound of the blade unsheathed resounded in Urza's ears. Urza's pupils narrowed. At this moment, Sarah has attacked with a sword. Without the slightest hesitation, Urza immediately raised his sword. Next moment, the sword and the sword clashed together in midair, and the sparks that splashed scattered in the air. Storm sword wind blade crossing. 99 green magic is unfolding in the center of the blade. Followed by, it was the sudden gust of wind that turned into a sharp blade and slashed Urza's exposed shoulder. Puff! The blood immediately spread out. The corner of Sarah's mouth grinned, and the blade blocked by Urza slashed again. The oncoming wind knocked Urza back directly to the ground. Urza! Mira Jane roared from behind. The two claws come together. Super sadistic rage. The black energy blast went straight to Sarah and blasted away. Storm sword tornado. Sarah slashed straight back with the blade. Boom, boom, boom. The white gust of wind came up and collided with the black vortex in the air. The impact of the diffusion 710 continued to rage in the surrounding forest. Trees were uprooted, and countless rubble was rolled into the sky. Some were annihilated by darkness. Some were chopped up by wind blades. With just one blow, everything visible within a range of hundreds of meters was destroyed. As soon as they landed, the two of them were the winner. Mira Jane came to Urza's side with the help of the energy exchange time just now. Girl in armor, are you okay? She looked at Urza, who was wiping blood. Asked. Urza shook his head. Small injury, it's fine. He looked forward and spoke slowly. Is this what you call the strongest candidate? It's just that, Sarah said with a smile. There was still disdain in his eyes. Really? Urza's eyes darkened. Light flickered on her body. The silver-white armor has disappeared. It was replaced by black armor that also had wings. Armor of black feather. Armor that significantly increases one-hit attack power. Holding the black feather sword in both hands, Urza stared at the figure in front of him. Mira, come on. You don't need to say it. Urza, bang, won the ground beneath Urza's feet shattered instantly. With the help of the black wings behind him, Urza instantly approached Sarah. Facing the attacking Urza, Sarah clenched the storm sword in both hands. Swipe hard. Storm sword jade green swing. The magic circle unfolds, and the high-level wind magic that Aragorn has shown is now in the world. The raging hurricane has the power to tear everything apart. Completely cover Urza. To be completely shredded in the storm. CCBB, Sarah yelled. Black feather moonshine. In that invisible gale, Urza's voice was so loud. Hum. Immediately after that, the deafening sound of the knife sounded in the storm. In Sarah's unbelievable eyes, not only did the swirling wind stagnate for a moment, the sword light burst into the tornado, and the huge tornado was directly cut off. The invisible wind began to lose its rotational force and began to spread around. And Urza was already close to Sarah. This guy. Sarah's pupils widened sharply. The next second, the black sharp sword slashed directly across his chest. Urza had appeared behind him. The blade swung down, and Sarah's chest exploded directly. Blood sprayed in the air. It's not over yet. Urza, get out of the way. Mira Jane's voice came from high up, and Urza didn't hesitate. Immediately instigated the wings of the black feather armor and evaded in the distance. Super cruel flash. Mira Jane, who was flying high in the sky, gathered dark energy in her hands. The black violet magic is like a black laser cannon. Fall towards Sarah below. AI won. It seemed that he understood that he alone could not resist the combination of the two. Sarah immediately shouted. AI-1, who had been watching the play with his arms in his arms, frowned slightly. These two guys are really not easy. However, even so, there is no way to escape the fate of being covered by sand and dust. He slowly raised his clasped hands, and he began to activate the magic in his body. Sand-shaped city wall. The sand and dust began to surge and gathered towards the sky above Sarah, condensed into a thick wall. Styling magic? Although far away, but Urza, who had been wary of Ivan, was suddenly surprised. The black beam of light fell on the thick sand city wall. Countless sands were continuously scattered under the impact of the black beam of light. The solid city wall collapsed directly into countless fine dust under such an impact. Flying in the air. Storm soared, great storm. Sarah's roar came from the ground again. The sudden rise of the superstorm wrapped all the dust scattered in the air in it. Fusion magic super sandstorm. This is fusion magic. Mira Jane above the sky was stunned. Get out of the way. Urza yelled from the ground. Gritting his teeth, Urza's whole body flashed again. Among all the armors, the fastest flying armor appeared on her body. Without the slightest hesitation, Urza chased after Mira Jane, who was above the sky. Boom, boom. The super-large dust storm enveloped the surrounding area for thousands of meters. The whirling wind brought unimaginable acceleration to the fine and sharp sand. The huge boulders that are encased in them, and countless trees were completely crushed under the wear and tear of sand and dust. Did you make it? AI when came to Sarah's side and supported him. Urza's slash just now is still bleeding out. Sarah's face paled from the massive blood loss. The pain made his face extremely grim. But at this moment, he just stared at the sandstorm ahead and shook his head. It's not that simple. AI won. There is no blood in the wind. 55 darkness madness. In the gap of sand and dust. The black magic claws protruded from it and directly grabbed Sarah and Iwan. Very. AI Win's eyes widened instantly. He looked at Urza and Mira Jane, who were gradually becoming clearer due to the weakening of the mad sand. The huge shield that stood obliquely wrapped the two of them in the angle of the ground. The mad sand left countless scratches on the shield, but it failed to break through Urza's strongest defense, the Vajra armor. The light flashed, and Urza returned to her usual attire. Are you all right, lady in armor? Mira Jane maintained her magic, while asking, Don't worry, that's not far. 35 Urza stood up. What about you? Are you okay? Oh, it's still a long way off. Then, let's go. As the voice fell, Mira Jane used her hands violently, and the dark frenzy that bound Sarah and Iwan was directly detonated. The huge explosion caused the two to cry out in pain. Meanwhile, Urza and Mira Jane dashed out at the same time. The two of them ran fast forward one by one. Look who hits him first, Urza. Mira Jane yelled. That must be me, Mila. Urza responded. Damn it. During the explosion, the two just stood up. Then I saw two figures running towards this side. Storm sword, gale barrier. Sarah hurriedly defended. Shape of sand, jungle of thorns. Not to be outdone, Iwan manipulated the sand and dust in an attempt to block the pace of the two. Light flashed over Urza's body. The Green Sea King's armor appeared on her body. The sword of the Sea King that appeared simultaneously in his hand slashed down towards the sand and thorns. The surging water flow drowned countless sand and dust. Make it lose any power. What? Water. Wen's eyes widened. The next moment, the two were already approaching. Sea King, sword of thunder. Urza murmured, and the slashing water slashed directly across the bodies of the two of them. A lot of blood splattered. Followed by, it was the enormous dark energy that Mira Jane gathered between her claws. Soul, exterminator. Darkness completely enveloped Sarah and AI-1. Even the screams were completely covered up by the violent roar. The scene returned to calm. Only two figures were left lying in a pool of blood. Goblin. Sarah raised her head with difficulty, as if she wanted to say something. But the gradually blurred vision no longer allowed him to make a sound. Boom! With the muffled sound, Sarah's head was completely buried in the ground. On the other side, AI-1, who was slightly injured, was weak. But he still laughed. It's a pity, even if you stop us here, you still can't keep the villagers in that village. He spoke slowly. What do you mean? Urza asked, frowning tightly. Dajdaj, the catastrophe is about to engulf this island, and the roar, after a lapse of 400 years, will resound on this world again. Is Chapter 126 over? What does this guy mean? He looked at AI-1, who had completely passed out. Urza frowned tightly. Calamity? Roar? Did he mean die lion? Mira Jane thought, rubbing her chin with one hand. Who knows? Urza shook his head. But what I care about the most is what he said was a lapse of 400 years. What exactly does that mean? Thinking to no avail, the two looked at each other and sighed in unison. In the distance, the dazzling light of the moondrops scattered on the top of the ruins attracted the eyes of the two of them. Anyway, there are enemies there, right? Mira Jane asked. The ritual of the moondrop is still going on, Urza replied. Then go back and help. Anyway, as long as the moondrop is stopped, then everything should be over. Urza made a decision. This time, Mira Jane rarely refuted. After confirming, the two immediately ran towards the top of the ruins. Temple of Moon, top floor. In the icy space that was wrapped, the battle between the brothers and sisters has reached a white-hot stage. The constant confrontation with the ice modeling magic caused a great consumption of the magic power of both of them. Looking at Gray, who was panting heavily in front of him, Leon's face was not good-looking. He clenched his fists, feeling the little magic power left in his body. He frowned tightly. Damn it, there's no magic to fight Lionra. 35, Gray's fists on the opposite side touched each other again. Ice make sledgehammer. 35, the magic circle unfolded, and a huge ice-made hammer condensed out of thin air, running towards Leon. Damn it, guy. Leon swung down with one hand. Ice make. Roar. Along with the roar, the white tiger that appeared out of thin air slammed into the giant hammer. In this wrestling, the magic of both sides shattered one after another. The magic power dropped a little again, finally making Leon angry. He looked at Gray and murmured, Why? Why can you still move? It's almost reached the limit. Gray said slowly with his head lowered, raised his head and looked at Leon. The consumption of magic power has almost reached its limit, but he widened his mouth and made a roar-like sound. I will never fall before you fall. Are you going to die with my senior brother? Leon shook his head, raised arms clenched into fists. I haven't fought Lion before. I really don't want to waste magic power on you. Gray straightened his arms and clenched his fists. If that's the case, let's use this to decide the outcome. 35 looking at Gray at the moment. Leon was stunned. Then the corner of his mouth raised a smile. You mean, do not use magic to fight? This is really good. Leon stepped forward and rushed out, and Gray was not to be outdone. Fist and fist are constantly fighting at this moment. Stop it, Leon. Gray punched Leon in the stomach. Wow. Leon let out a cry of pain, and the whole person took 2 steps back. Stop. Impossible. I must defeat Lionra. I must surpass Ulu. Leon wiped the corners of his mouth and clenched his fists back. A punch hit Gray's cheek. Gray staggered, barely standing still. This desire can never stop. 35, he shouted. Boom, a heavy kick hit his face, knocking him out. He slammed into the ice wall that he had condensed. There were some cracks in the hard walls. Ulu is not dead at all. She is now the ice crystal that was turned into absolute ice. 99 Gray withdrew the kicked right leg and shouted angrily. Stop! You are killing Ulu like this. Leon stood up and lowered his head. Makes Gray unable to see his face clearly. I've already known about this kind of boring thing. It's no longer the Ulu it used to be, he said slowly. It's just a pile of ice chips. What? Gray's eyes widened. So, already knew that? Looking at Gray's unbelievable expression, Leon laughed. That is a naive kid like you still thinks Ulu is still alive. What did you say? Gray's face turned hideous. Cut. The smile on Leon's face remained unchanged. He raised his palm. I said, Ulu is already dead. The azure blue magic circle unfolded, and the ice geese flew out of the magic circle in an instant. It slammed into Gray's body at a very fast speed. Ugh! Gray let out a scream. Under the attack of dozens of ice geese, his body has become bruised and bruised. A large opening was cut in the abdomen. Blood was gushing continuously. Gray covered his abdomen in pain and knelt on the ground. UBD, you really don't keep your word. Leon raised a smile. It's called soldiers who never tire of deceit. No matter how hard you struggle, it's an indisputable fact that Dai Lion will be resurrected soon. In order to prove that I have surpassed Ulu, I have to hit Dai Lion, who cannot even hit Ulu. As for you, just lie here quietly. This is my last mercy to you. 35, ignoring Gray, who was injured, Leon decided to leave. BD, stop for me. Your self-motivation is indeed admirable, but you have gone astray. I will definitely wake you up. Gray roared from behind. The surging ice sword came straight to Leon's back. Click! The sword of ice penetrated Leon's body, but there was no blood oozing as expected. Some are just shattered whole ice sculptures. I stand in. Gray understood the magic in an instant. Ice make white tiger. Leon had already rushed behind Gray. One hand suddenly waved down. The ferocious ice made white tiger roared out, as if to completely swallow Gray. Your stillness can't beat my motion, Gray. Looking at the scene in front of him, Leon showed a contemptuous smile. Zhengyi, the sudden ice-made cage, locked the ice-made giant tiger in it. Above the cage, the magic circle in Gray's hand flickered. Ice-made cage. Asking for flowers, Gray stood on top of the cage and looked at Leon with a hint of mockery on his face. Is this what you really are? Leon. He looked down at the figure below and said, It's a pitiful beast that doesn't understand the world at all. Boring. Leon waved his arms, attempting to control the white tiger to break free from Gray's cage. Roar. The giant tiger roared, and its head was constantly hitting the cage. But in any case, the cage did not have any broken phenomenon. Ow! Leon's eyes widened. One-handed modeling magic cannot maintain stability. Is this what Ulu taught? Gray jumped down from above, his palms touching the ground. He opened his mouth and said, And it's because of the same manipulation of ice that you start to ignore the falling cold air around you, right? What do you want to say? Leon frowned. Our guild also has a master who uses ice. Although I can't catch up with him, I've learned a lot from him. Gray's deep voice echoed in this icy world. Despite the magic of ice, the shape is not the only one. He raised his head. Looking directly at Leon, the magic in his hand began to urge. For ice, the cold itself is the deadliest thing. Leon's pupils trembled at this moment, because he found that in himself. I don't know when it has been spread by ice crystals. Is this the chill left on me when I just fought? Leon touched the ice crystals on his body. The icy coldness made him feel a little overwhelmed. I saw a spring. The magic power turned into a cold current and rushed out. The ice crystals that were originally covered on the ground seemed to be Gray's tools at this moment. It began to spread wildly under the influence of the cold snap. Leon wants to escape, but the chill on his body made his limbs temporarily stiff. This short time, Leon's entire body was completely frozen by the spreading ice. Under the erosion of that cold current, Leon even had the blood flowing in his body. All began to faintly show signs of condensation. Raising his clenched right fist, Gray slammed into the ice under his feet. Click, click. In just a moment, cracks spread across this icy world. Then it exploded. Ugh! Leon's mouth widened, weakly fell to the ground. His wide eyes turned to Gray, who was still standing in front of him. His eyes were full of disbelief. Gray, you thump. Not even finished speaking, Leon fell to the ground. Voof, voof. Gray breathed heavily and also fell to his knees on the ground. I recalled the scene when Luo Xingchen destroyed Lullaby, the corners of his mouth raised slightly to completely freeze the living body. It's a realm beyond reach, the stars. But that's the end of it, right? He leaned against the ice wall weakly and let out a long sigh of relief. Indeed, Leon, the leader, has been defeated. So this incident should be over, right? B. Chapter 127. What a terrible monster. Yaha, love. Love what love. Run away. 39. The second floor of the ruins. Lucy and Happy, who had fled, let out high-pitched screams. Lucy here, turning a corner. Happy pointed at the stairs to the side and shouted, "Go up, go up." Lucy urged behind him, without the slightest hesitation. One person and one cat ran towards the top of the stairs. Behind him, countless masked wizards swarmed with various weapons in their hands. They ran to the top floor. Quick, quick, don't let them run away. Catch them. The chasing mages shouted loudly. Go straight to the stairs leading to the top floor. At the moment, most of the top layer of the ruins has collapsed. However, the vicinity of the hole where the moonlight shone down onto Lyanra remained intact. After Lucy and Happy came up the stairs, then he came to the outside of the ice space created by Leon. Not far from July 10th is a group of people who are carrying out the ceremony of the drop of the moon. At this moment, one person and one cat can't care so much anymore. Basically, run wherever there is space. How did these guys get here? Lucy, who was running wildly, shouted. Love, I don't know at all, but looking at their coat of arms, it seems that they belong to the ghost of the corpse of the Dark Guild. Happy responded. A few minutes ago, since Luo Xingchen and Ursha fought, Lucy and Happy were attacked by this group of masked guys. Before, Lucy could fight back for a while with his celestial spirit magic. However, the other party was all mages after all. Therefore, Lucy's counterattack was particularly weak. In addition, the figures that keep gathering together, forcing Lucy and Happy to choose the option of running away. After all, Natsu is being beaten by Cecil right now, and Luo Xingchen didn't know where the fight with Ursha went. Therefore, this scene appeared. At this moment, the ice in front of Lucy seemed to have lost the supply of magic power. It dissipated. Leon, who has almost lost consciousness, is revealed. Gray, who is already injured and powerless, was sitting against the wall. Gray! Lucy exclaimed. Gray, help us. Happy burst out crying. Tears poured down his face, which was a little embarrassing because of crying. Happy ran wildly in Gray's direction. Hey, hey, hey. What are you doing? Gray, who was resting in the corner, was also stunned. Watching Lucy and Happy being chased by a group of people and fleeing frantically, he quickly stood up with his hands on the ground. There are Dark Guilds behind you. Lucy yelled. Damn, can only fight. 27. Gray gritted his teeth and touched his hands together. Ice make. Huh. Before looking at the hands, the magic circle the size of a pot lid opened, and the toy-sized ice hammer that condensed out. Gray frowned. It's over. My magic power is not enough. Looking at this scene, Lucy suddenly became desperate. You are not kidding, love. Who can save me? Happy cried even more fiercely. Gray tilted his head to look at the cliff not far away caused by Ursha's magic, and quickly waved his hand. Don't come this way. There's no road ahead. 35. Lucy and Happy charged in front of Gray. He stopped abruptly. His eyes clearly saw the fault ahead, and below the fault is the second floor of the ruins. Unfortunately, the second floor seems to have been occupied by the ghosts of the corpse. Crowds converge on the fault. At this moment, he was staring at the three people above who were forced into a desperate situation. No, we're not going to die here, are we? Lucy was anxious. Love, if we still have magic power, we can run away. Happy grimaces. You unscrupulous cat. Only caring about yourself? Lucy looked at Happy angrily. Do you still care about this? We'll be gone soon. Happy responded weakly. Hey, don't give up easily. It's not good. Let's fight. Gray clenched his fists. Although his whole body was sore, at this moment Gray also had no way out. The crowd chased by the ghost of the corpse also stopped running at this moment, changed to walking forward, slowly approaching the three of them. Hey, leave them all for me. At this moment, Leon, who had just been defeated by Gray, spoke up. I don't know when. Leon has already climbed to a wall and leaned against it. Looking at the crowd in front of him, he shouted, The grievance with Fairy Tale, I will settle it myself. I don't need your help. Just step back. He waved to the masked crowd. The members of the masked corpse ghosts ignored Leon's intentions. Instead, he continued to walk towards the few people in front of him. I told you to stop. Didn't you hear? It seemed that his words didn't work anymore. Leon uttered angrily. However, the crowd still did not stop. One of them turned around and looked at Leon. A disdainful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. I'm sorry, Lord Lingdi. You can't control this matter. What did you say? Leon's eyes widened. Unbelievable, shouted out. He couldn't imagine. This group of people who defected to themselves a year ago and have been doing things for themselves. Will you openly disobey your own orders? Without any explanation, the ghost of the corpse had already approached Lucy. Catch alive. Give it to me. Oh, countless people echoed loudly. In the next moment, the people of the ghost of the corpse launched a charge towards the three. Tian Luan, sword of dazzling. The sword light that burst into the interior of the ghost of the corpse. The light flashed, and in just an instant, dozens of people fell. I said, you guys, what do you want to do to the people in our guild? Immediately afterwards, a frantic voice resounded from the back of the crowd. Next moment, a terrifying dark wave exploded behind the corpse of ghosts. The aftermath of the explosion of many shadow followers flew directly into the sky. Then it fell rapidly towards the ground. This voice is Urza and Mira. Lucy sighed heavily. The magic power was completely consumed, making Lucy's eyes blurred, and he fell directly to the ground. But despite this, the corners of Lucy's mouth still curled into a smile. It's saved. Happy sighed. Nearly killed by you. Gray shook his head, complaining. Well, accident. Lucy smirked. The first floor of the ruins. The ground that was originally flat was devastated by some attacks. The surrounding walls were covered with charred black after being bombarded by lightning. On the ground, broken magic crystals scattered all around. In the middle, the two Taoist 1.1 shadows are opposed to each other. Clearly, the two had fought here. I patted the dust on my sleeves. Luo Xingchen, who had no scars all over his body, looked at the figure on the opposite side. Said, It seems that you can't even maintain your transformation with the consumption of magic power now. Opposite him, it was Ursha who just fought Luo Xingchen. However, it is different from the image of the short old man before. A decent white kimono wrapped the exquisite figure. However, it may be because of the lightning strike. There were many large areas of damage to the clothes. There were also marks scorched by lightning on the exposed fair skin. The long black hair that was straight and long appeared in large stretches. Drastic heaving chest, and the brows that hadn't loosened at that moment confirmed that she was not easy at the moment. Sure enough, your strength is definitely not something I can match. What a horrible monster. Chapter 128. The unknown space hidden in the ground, breathing heavily. Ursha stood up, trembling slightly. The magic is activated again. The broken crystal ball pieces floated up again. In mid-air, it reassembled into an intact crystal ball, floating around her. But, even so, the little girl has to stop you. 35, the crystal ball began to flicker continuously. Changed to 16, with Ursha's urging. He shot towards Luo Xingchen again. Zilla won the moment the crystal ball approached Luo Xingchen. Blue lightning appeared around him, flickering constantly. The violent energy contained in the thunder and lightning directly shattered all the crystal balls. It turned into countless fragments and fell to the ground. Ursha had no surprises. This scene has happened many times. Her attacks are always blocked like this, easily. Why? He stared at Ursha in front of him. Luo Xingchen spoke slowly. You mean what? Ursha frowned. Luo Xingchen had no intention of fighting and wrapped his arms around 22. His eyes turned to the moonlight that should have fallen from the sky not far away. It has completely disappeared at this moment. Immediately, Luo Xingchen understood that moon drop should be blocked. Thinking of this, Luo Xingchen ignored it. Keep talking. Frozen the ice pulled by lion. He turned his head. Looking at Ursha, he said, "It's your mother." Ursha was stunned for a moment. Then he shook his head and smiled, although Ursha tried her best to hide. But Luo Xingchen could still see a bit of desolation in it. It's like a child who has lost everything. She shook her head lightly. I didn't expect that Lord Xingchen even knew this. 39. Ursha, Ulu's tears. This is the meaning of your name, right? Luo Xingchen said. He tears. She smiled and shook her head. Whose tears are the ultimate? Who knows? She turned around and looked into the distance. Mother, she is just a woman who is obsessed with magic and was abandoned by her father. For her relatives, I'm afraid she has never understood this concept. Ursha's voice is ethereal and poignant. It should be said that the feelings towards disciples will be stronger than those towards relatives. 35. So, even if I sacrifice my life to seal die lion for the sake of my disciples, I wouldn't have much feeling. 5. So, she turned around, looking directly at Luo Xingchen in front of him. I did this. Die lion is a powerful fighting force. The value it can bring is absolutely unimaginable. So I must resurrect it. At the moment, Ursha's voice just fell. Roar. It was as if a roar from the abyss was released from a distance. The huge magic power, mixed with the roar, made the surrounding space seem to start to tremble. But the already dilapidated ruins continue to fall. It seems to have noticed something. Ursha's smile grew even wider. As if the goal had been achieved, he opened his mouth and said, Sorry, it looks like Dai Lionra has started to recover as planned. Luo Xingchen stared at Ursha. There was no fear on his face that he felt because of Dai Lionra's resuscitation. Some are just complex faces. After a moment of silence, he said, It also means that you destroyed your mother's hard work with your own hands. 35. Ursha's smile stiffened. Shun Sheng said, She is not my mother. It's up to you. Luo Xingchen said, If Lord Xingchen wants to say these boring things, then I will forgive me. 35. Ursha shook her head. If you believe me, go to the previous Magic Development Bureau to check. Maybe you will gain something. After putting this sentence down, Luo Xingchen stopped talking. Ursha looked at the man in front of her with complicated eyes, then turned around and walked towards the outside of the ruins. Dai Lionra's recovery is complete. The next thing is the ghost of the corpse. Therefore, Ursha did not need to stay. However, Luo Xingchen's strength is beyond everyone's expectations. 99. Ursha frowned and murmured, although he didn't use all his power, but I am afraid that none of the 7 followers of Purgatory can defeat this monster alone. How does it compare to Jalal? How about President Hades? A series of questions flashed in Ursha's mind. In the end, it stayed on Luo Xingchen's last question. Magic Development Bureau. What exactly does that mean? And how did he know? That place. Shook his head. Ursha looked at the night sky outside. Just go and see. After making up his mind, Ursha stepped out of this place. Standing still, Luo Xingchen shook his head slightly. For Urtia, it is actually a tragic character that Luo Xingchen liked in his previous life. So, if he can change it, he didn't mind saying a few more words. However, the word of mouth is unfounded, so the best way is to let her check it herself. With her identity in mind, it is not difficult to find out some information about the Magic Development Bureau from many years ago. After all the evidence was in front of her, she naturally believed it. The thoughts returned just when Luo Xingchen was about to go to the bottom to solve Dai Lionra. The ceiling behind them suddenly began to vibrate. The finely broken gravel fell to the ground from above. Luo Xingchen stopped what he was about to take. He turned and looked up suspiciously. Next moment, the ceiling shattered. Natsu, who was hit by the boulder in his stomach, screamed and slammed into Luo Xingchen not far in front of him. The enormous force exerted on Natsu was not dissipated by this floor. Without any pause, Natsu smashed right through this floor. Continued to fly down. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions came from below. The splashing smoke even rushed from the ground to the height of the first floor. Natsu, with doubts, Luo Xingchen walked forward. Ahem, that BD. 35, don't run. You're having a fight with me. Ahem. Natsu's roar came from the pothole that Natsu smashed. But unfortunately, Cecil above did not respond to Natsu. Perhaps thinking that the battle had been resolved, he left alone. Or maybe it's because he's no longer interested in dealing with underdogs like Natsu. But no matter which one it is, it indicates one thing. Yes, Natsu lost to Cecil. In the dragon-to-dragon battle, Cecil successfully suppressed Natsu. With the advantage of the attributes of the Earth Dragon, Natsu's flames barely functioned as they were supposed to. Even more so, at the end, Cecil attacked with all his strength, directly into the ground. Luo Xingchen came to the top of the pothole. Looking down, the calm eyes gradually began to show waves. This is through the straight pothole. Luo Xingchen could see where Natsu was now. It was under two broken potholes, the one in front of him and the one on the ground floor that was pulled by a lion. In other words, Natsu reached the ground floor after crossing the first floor. Also did not stop falling. He smashed through the ground floor again and went to a place unknown to everyone, under the underground space where Dai Lion is stored, since there is still a layer. Chapter 129, The Badge of Time, The Disaster of Awakening. That BD. I must hit him. Natsu screamed and got up from the rubble. Not caring about the scars on his body, Natsu patted the dust on his body. So did you just lose? Luo Xingchen asked from the pothole on the first floor. Not at all. Just now. I was just careless. Natsu retorted with a lack of confidence. However, in one fight, I will definitely win. Looking at Natsu's state, Luo Xingchen shook his head helplessly. Not sure if Natsu will win in one fight, though. But it's almost there after all. Apart from the numerous small scars on Natsu's body at this moment, Natsu doesn't seem to have much of a problem. Natsu shook his neck and muttered, "How do I get to this place?" His eyes looked around, trying to find somewhere to get to the top. Wait a moment. Suddenly, Natsu's gaze stopped somewhere. His eyes widened instantly, and his pupils shrank suddenly. Even his body began to tremble slightly. I'm afraid even Natsu himself doesn't know. It's because of fear that he is shaking, still out of excitement. His eyes were fixed on the front, on the huge altar lit by weak candles. The huge blue body is so conspicuous, although the body does not contain any magic power, but the ferocious dragon head, which is still well preserved, is still lifelike. Xingchen, I saw a dragon. Natsu said those words slowly with a trembling voice. Dragon. Luo Xingchen, who was on the first floor, was a little surprised. Nodding slightly, Luo Xingchen got up. He didn't go down for the first time, but looked behind him. This is where Ursha was just fought. That is to say, the magic power that belongs to him and Ursha still pervades here. Can it be successful? Such thoughts popped into my mind. Luo Xingchen was a little nervous after a long absence. Taking a deep breath, Luo Xingchen opened his eyes. He slowly reached out his hand toward the air. Old rules still have to sacrifice something. However, it seems that luck is almost overdrawn. Below, Natsu was still yelling. Attracted Luo Xingchen's attention. Seemingly thinking of something, Luo Xingchen couldn't help but smile. Or let's sacrifice Natsu's luck or something. Anyway, that guy's always been unlucky. The joking words made Luo Xingchen's nervous mood relaxed. The magic sublimator began to communicate in my mind. With devouring magic, Luo Xingchen could keenly perceive the magic molecules scattered in the air by Ursha in an instant. Not the slightest omission. The magic sublimator was activated to absorb the surrounding magic, change places from time to time, and squat up and down from time to time. But the raised palm never put it down. The golden light spots are constantly gathering towards Luo Xingchen's hands. After confirming that the magic molecules in every corner have been collected, Luo Xingchen sank. Looking at the center of the palm, the light is constantly shining, and it's getting more and more prosperous. More and more prosperous? Even Luo Xingchen couldn't help but narrowed his eyes slightly. Sometime, Luo Xingchen clearly felt the foreign body in his hand. At that moment, Luo Xingchen's eyes flashed a ray of light. Done. When the light dissipated, a badge inscribed with Ursha appeared in his hand. The golden slip edge confirms the noble status of the badge. Below the portrait, the word time also confirms its function. The magic crystal emblem of the lost magic arc of time. Holding the badge tightly, feel the strong power of time contained in it. Luo Xingchen raised a smile. Looking at the center of the pothole, Luo Xingchen did not hesitate at all. When he even stepped towards the pothole created by Nat Su and jumped down. At the moment, the top floor. After Urza and Mira Jane arrived, the battle situation began to show a one-sided attitude. Under the mutual cooperation of Urza and Mira Jane, the two S-rank mages, under Lucy's horrified gaze, the people who have been chasing Lucy and the happy ghost just now seemed to be made of paper. Simply unbeatable. The demon's claws swung down towards the few people in front of him. In an instant, the surging darkness directly swallowed the miscellaneous soldiers in front of Mira Jane. On the other hand, Urza is also not to be outdone. With the help of the wings behind Tianluan's armor, Urza flew high in the air. The blade behind her wraps around her body, like a queen guarded by a sword. Tianluan, sword of circulation. Dozens of blades that were constantly spinning flew out. Each handle has great power. Dozens of sharp swords began to fly wildly in the crowd. Every time he passed a person, he brought a splash of blood. Shuttle one after another. Countless people let out the sound of mourning. The blood that spilled out seemed to be intertwined into flowers one after another in midair. Blood flowers. Beautiful and deadly. Boom! Mira Jane stepped one person directly under the high heels. The hair, held up by the magic, seemed to dance in the air. Crimson lips rose slowly, showing sharp fangs. Devil, this guy's a demon. The ghost of the corpse started, but some even began to flee. Come when you want, leave when you want. It's not that easy. Mira Jane licked her lips. Bloodthirsty and terrifying. One kick kicked the person under his feet toward the opposite crowd. The magic began to gather between Mira Jane's hands. The dark black magic circle unfolds. Super cruel flash. 55 light flashed over Urza's body. Transformation. Thunder Emperor's armor. The silver-white armor had disappeared and was replaced. It is a slim-fitting combat Cheongsam with turquoise blue mixed with golden yellow decoration. The crimson hair was tied up in a plait at the back. With a long gun in hand, he aimed at the crowd in front of him. Thunder Emperor, roaring gun. The azure blue lightning and the dark black impact blasted towards the crowd in front. Boom, boom, boom. A terrifying explosion is in full bloom at this moment. Countless people didn't even scream. They were completely engulfed by the attack of the two. So beautiful, so strong. Lucy, who was behind him, stared blankly at the backs of the two people in front of him and murmured softly. That ghost of the corpse was completely defeated by only the two of them. Even among them, Mira Jane also took the time to knock down all those who were performing the moondrop ceremony. The ceremony was forcibly stopped. In this way, the drop of the moon is basically stopped. 5, Urza swung the spear and stood beside him. After looking around to make sure no one was there, only then did he take back the Thunder Emperor's armor and return to its original appearance. Love. As expected of Urza, after the crisis was lifted, Happy didn't hesitate to give Urza his compliment. What about me? Kitty. Mira Jane, who had returned to her usual appearance, turned around. He folded his arms and looked at Happy with a half-smile. Definitely better than Urza, right? She whispered. But let Happy be shocked. Looking at Urza, she also seemed to be waiting for an answer at the moment. Waiting for the answer whether she is strong or Mira Jane strong. Zhao Diheo. However, no matter who is talking about this kind of question, it is dead. Happy collapsed suddenly and hid behind Lucy in mourning. That look made everyone smile. Anyway, this mission is finally solved. 99 Mira Jane clapped her hands and said, "Not yet." Suddenly, Leon's voice behind everyone attracted everyone's attention. "What are you talking about?" Lucy suddenly felt uneasy. Leon leaned against the wall and turned his head. "Speak slowly. The ritual has been completed, wearing lion and absorbing enough moonlight. Next, the calamity is about to awaken." 35. Just when Leon's voice fell, "Oh!" The roar that seemed to come from the depths of hell made everyone cover their ears involuntarily. The coercion that belonged to Lionra swept the entire island at this moment. Let everyone involuntarily bend over slightly Xian, as if this coercion was oppressing the bones of their whole body. P.S. Dear readers, there's a repeat problem in the next chapter. Please subscribe to the last chapter. The last chapter is normal. Chapter 130, revised. I will never let you go. This one is normal. Woo. 39, another deafening roar came from deep underground. The roar that seemed to be shocking made Lucy froze in place. How could? She widened her eyes and murmured, "This voice." Gray looked at his feet in horror where the voice came from. This voice, Gray will never forget for the rest of his life. The sky dyed red by the flames, shocked the roar of heaven and earth. Cries, screams, despair, and death echoed in my ears. All in all, Gray will never forget, clenching his fists tightly. Damn it! Is it really resurrected? 39. The sense of intimidation, it's scary. Mira Jane frowned and said, "Is this the lion pull?" Sweat seeped from his forehead, and Urza's expression was full of seriousness. A guy who is more terrifying than the demon Fern and Larabai. While the devils revive, Happy feared tears welling up in his eyes. Damn it, absolutely can't revive this guy. Urza made a quick decision. He looked at everyone with firm eyes. "Let's go." Mira Jane nodded knowingly. The two took the lead in running towards the bottom of the ruins. What is this for? Under such a threat, Lucy, who was still a rookie wizard, seemed to be losing his ability to think. To stop Lion from pulling, of course. Gray responded. Gritting his teeth, Gray was silent for a moment. 22 eyes are gradually replaced by perseverance. Looks like that's the only way to use it. Yeah, that trick, absolutely freezing. 39. The ground floor of the ruins. Huge ice crystals began to slowly melt from the very top. The ice that has been frozen for 10 years seems to have lost its tenacity. Cracks gradually spread above, and the demon wrapped in ice crystals slowly opened those scarlet eyes. Boom. The ice crystals were completely shattered. The devil, who had been covered in dust for 10 years, finally revealed his huge figure at this moment. Hoo. It seems to be roaring in anger, and it seems to be uttering unexplained screams. His hands broke free from the shackles of the ice and stretched out after a long absence. Not far away, an extremely excited smile appeared on Hagrid's face, who was covered in black robes. Very good. It's finally coming to life. Lion pulls. 99, Father. 35 right now. Behind Hagrid, there was a sound that he was familiar with. He turned his head slightly and looked at the burly man walking behind him. Hagrid raised a smile at the corners of his mouth and asked, "Cecil, what's the matter? The fire dragon should have solved it, right?" 35, of course. Cecil responded confidently. "Very well. You have lived up to the Dragon Slayer crystal I gave you. Since it is a dragon, you have to use a dragon to hit it." Hagrid nodded slightly and patted Cecil on the shoulder. "But Sarah and Ivan have no news yet, and they don't know what happened." 35, Cecil frowned slightly. "Do not worry." Hagrid turned his gaze to Lion, who was gradually breaking free. Shun Shung said, "With this, we don't need to rely on any other power at all. Listen to your father's words." Cecil was stunned for a while, then smiled dumbly. "That's right. Father, with this power, we can go straight into the Grimoire Heart. The Ghost of the Corpse is only an affiliated guild, after all. Do you think so?" Cecil. Hagrid tilted his head slightly. Looking at Cecil, the smile on his face was a little weird. "Ah, that's right. Wasn't it agreed at the beginning, as long as we complete this quest, we can directly advance to Grimoire Heart, right? 5 Cecil felt a little strange and said softly, Hee hee, child. Hagrid chuckled and shook his head. With a smile, he said, Ursha isn't here. You don't have to be so restrained. 95, father means. Cecil frowned slightly. He suddenly found that it seems that I can't understand this father who has raised me for many years. Once we have this power, do you think we still need to follow the orders of the Devil's Heart? Hagrid shifted his gaze, staring at the huge body in front of him. Open your mouth softly. But the words uttered exploded in Cecil's ears like thunder. Hagrid slowly raised his arms, as if to embrace the world. Loudly said, That is enough to make the world frighten. Before it, Grimoire Heart. It's nothing but tiny ants. Cecil's pupils shrank sharply. So what do you think? Cecil. Hagrid looked at Cecil with scrutiny. But we have no way of grasping it. Cecil pondered for a moment and then expressed his concerns. Don't worry, I have already solved that, but I need your help. Hagrid paused, his deep eyes fixed on Cecil's eyes. After a while, he spoke slowly. Then, would you like to? Facing his father's expectant gaze, Cecil did his part, and without even thinking, nodded heavily. Don't worry, father. I was raised by you, and I will always remember the kindness of these years. As long as it's my father's arrangement, I'm willing. Hagrid smiled, and he seemed to be smiling happily. He patted Cecil on the shoulder and nodded incessantly. Very well, it's not a waste of my hard work. Just as the two were talking, the sound of footsteps coming from far and near came from behind the two. Hagrid frowned. Goblins who get in the way. Cecil was also instantly ready to fight. Hey, those 2 guys over there aren't. He looked at the 2 people standing in front of him. Lucy covered her mouth and exclaimed, Although I haven't seen Hagrid, but Cecil Lucy has seen it. Isn't he supposed to be fighting Natsu? Where's Natsu? Looks like there are 2 remaining enemies. Mira Jane lowered her eyes. The magic seemed to begin to surge. Quick fight. Lion will soon be free from the shackles of ice. Urza swapped out the long sword, ready to go. Unlike the vigilance of the 2, Gray came here. His eyes were placed on Lionra's body. The ice on the upper body is turned into water, sprinkled on the ground, waiting to flow into the sea. The ferocious face constantly raised the sky and made a roaring sound. This is Calamity, the calamity that destroyed Gray's happiness. He clenched his fists tightly. Aha! Just when the atmosphere was tense. Weak laughter lingered in another footstep in the underground space. Lion pull. That's Lion pull. Leon leaned against the wall. He walked in slightly trembling and slowly raised his head. Excited eyes watched Lion pull. Leon, looking at Leon, Gray opened his mouth. Ignore what Gray meant. Leon walked forward with difficulty. I finally see you, Lion. This guy, it's up to me. In order to surpass Ulu, as long as I can hit you, I will definitely surpass Ulu. Leon crossed the crowd and came not far from Lion. Are you still having your sweet dreams? Lord Zero, Hagrid said at this moment. Leon turned his head and looked at the man in black robe in front of him. Isn't it the dream of all of us to destroy Lion 713? He looked at Hagrid and asked, Only I can do it here, despite the injuries. But Leon still patted his chest hard. Don't be naive, Lord Zero. Cecil shook his head gently, looking at Leon with pity. Beyond the master or something. Revenge or something. I'm afraid only fools like you and your subordinates would have such a boring idea. It's utterly ridiculous. What do you mean? No, who are you guys? The words of the 2 were added to the actions of the group of people on the top floor just now. Leon seemed to understand something, yelling at the 2 of them. It's so pitiful. It's not clear until now, to tell you the truth. Cecil put his arms around him. He spoke slowly. Our purpose was never to destroy Lionra. As for why I want to cooperate with you, it's just to hide people's eyes and ears. Use the title of Emperor Zero to cover up the whereabouts of the ghost of our Dark Guild, so as to avoid those guys in the council. You have been lying to me. Leon widened his eyes and murmured. Who told you to be so easy to deceive? Cecil asked rhetorically. But that's right. After all, you're just a frog in the bottom of a well. How much experience can you expect from you? Cecil said disdainfully. Attempting to challenge Lion? What a joke. Hey, have you two bastards said enough? Cecil's voice just fell. Gray's roar came over. He stared at Cecil and Hagrid in front of him and said loudly, although Leon's actions and thoughts have gone astray, he has been working hard to beat Lion, a guy who tramples on other people's dreams at will. I will never let you go. Chapter 131 is nothing magic power began to rise above Gray's body. Ho 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 dash. But at this time Lion, who had left half of his body, allowed a deafening roar, attracted everyone's attention. It's so noisy. Lucy covered her ears in pain. Even Urza and Mira Jane's faces turned ugly. This is the demon of calamity. Wearing lion, Urza stared at the huge body ahead. Murmured, "Does this guy only roar?" Mira Jane frowned. It seemed that the magic emanating from Gray was drawn to Lionra. The scarlet in his eyes was several times more intense. The ferocious fangs were wide open, and the roar was nonstop. Looking at the group of small figures in front of him, Lion raised his huge fist. With a rushing sound of breaking the wind, it smashed towards the people below. Get out of the way! Gray didn't even care about Cecil and Hagrid in front of him now. Under the threat of Lionra, he let out a screeching cry. The rest did not hesitate at all. They all took their steps and moved to the side to avoid them. Next moment, boom! The terrifying giant fist smashed to the ground. The power of the tyrant directly caused cracks like cobwebs to appear on the ground. Countless shattered gravel mixed with aroused smoke and dust filled the surroundings wildly. The wind pressure that rolled up blew the hair tips of everyone present in 713. Are you all right? Urza landed smoothly, shouting to everyone around him against the frontal wind pressure. No problem, this guy's a little slow. 99, not far away, Mira Jane responded loudly. Just the power of a punch. Is it so terrifying? Although he dodged. But Lucy, who fell to the ground because he ran too fast, complained. Happy next to Love echoed. Damn, this guy's about to break free. Gray clenched his fists tightly. Different from the horror and solemnity of Urza, et al. Cecil and Hagrid both saw such a scene. On the contrary, he raised an excited smile. Sure enough, this is the Lion pull, and only this level of strength can make the final product close to perfection. 35 Hagrid stared intently at the huge body. In his eyes, it seemed to contain the heat of a child seeing a toy. He kept muttering, "It's coming. Right now, when all the ice melts, the magic circle can be triggered." Once he missed a hit, Lionra let out a roar again. It seemed that he was not satisfied that his attack was dodged. Slowly raised the fist that fell to the ground. In the smoky center, where no one notices, CCBB. A crack appeared on the huge fist that Lion pulled. Although tiny. However, there are indeed signs of shattering. Lion didn't care about the small crack on the fist. Scarlet eyes filled with unimaginable fury, staring at Urza's people. A sharp roar resounded constantly. Raising the giant fist again, Lion pulls ready to attack again. Sure enough, can you only use absolute freezing? Looking at this scene, Gray's bewildered heart gradually firmed up. Immediately stepped forward, dodged the fist drawn by Lion, who had a limited attack range because he couldn't move. Came to a position it couldn't reach for the time being. Also stay away from Urza et al. After making sure no one interferes, feet slightly apart, hands crossed in front of you. There was determination in Gray's eyes. The blue magic circle unfolded under his feet. The icy cold air erupted into a substantive pure white current. Gray UBD. Looking at Gray's movements, Leon discovered his intention immediately. Suddenly shouted, "Stop! Don't use that magic. Do you know how much time and effort it took me to melt that ice cube? I will pull Lion to reseal it. Use absolute freeze." Gray didn't mean to stop. The magic power that had just been restored began to pour out frantically. Absolutely frozen. Hearing the name, Urza also understood what Gray wanted to do. Suddenly he shouted, "Stop it for me! It's that magic that uses its own life to condense ice that will never melt." Lucy covered her mouth in surprise. Love. Happy frowned and nodded. UBD, do you want to die? Mira Jane also roared. See, Gray still shows no signs of stopping. Immediately, several people rushed towards Gray's direction. Attempt to stop Gray. Hurry up. Leon's eyes on the other side began to be covered with bloodshots. In this case, things will only be endless, even if you turn into ice cubes, but one day I will melt it and challenge it again. Leon yelled. Gray murmured, now, that's the only way. If you want to stop this guy, this is the only way. Oh, 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 oh. The sound that spread throughout the space sounded again. Seeing that the magic that terrified him reappeared, Dai Lion's entire body began to move uncomfortably. The ice cubes in the lower body also began to crack under the agitation of Dai Lion. Something's wrong. Hagrid's eyes widened. It seemed that he understood what Gray wanted to do, and Hagrid was instantly angry. He shouted at the figure beside him, You mustn't let that guy succeed. Cecil. Cecil reacted immediately. He nodded heavily, immediately took a step towards Gray and rushed out. The burly body has a speed different from that of the body. Cecil was rapidly approaching Gray. Kid, stop me. BD Talon. At this moment, a sudden flame slammed into Cecil's body. Unpredictable, Cecil widened his eyes and flew out. It smashed on the wall behind, and countless cracks exploded. The flames dissipated, and Natsu stood in front of Gray with a punch. Natsu? 35 Gray was stunned. Suddenly, Grayer's crossed hands were forcibly pressed down. Looking back, he looked at the figure in front of him. It's definitely frozen. You'd better put away from me. 35 Luo Xingchen's eyes turned to Dai Lionra, who was not far away. Life is gone. It's really gone. Hearing Luo Xingchen's words, Gray gritted his teeth. But Dai Lion pulls it. It's left to me. Luo Xingchen interrupted Gray's words directly. UBD, calm me down. Urza, who had rushed forward, punched Gray directly in the cheek. Ugh, eyes widened. Gray's whole body took off directly to a height of 1 meter, and then smashed to the ground. A huge bag suddenly swelled up on his cheeks. AI, Urza. He looked at Urza with a fierce aura in front of him. Gray took a step back in horror. If you're messing around, you might just knock you out. Mira Jane glared at Gray. Then he turned his head, looked at Luo Xingchen, and asked softly, Xingchen, are you all right? Luo Xingchen returned a smile and said confidently, Don't worry. Now Dai Lion pulls the words, turning his eyes back. He looked at the behemoth that was struggling constantly. Slowly said, It's nothing. Chapter 132 Farewell, Master. Cecil jumped out of the wall, rubbed his belly, looking at Natsu, who was burning with flames on the opposite side. There was a faint anger surging in his eyes. It seems that your life is quite big, Fire Dragon Kid. Cecil spoke slowly. Natsu shook his fist, and the corner of his mouth raised a smile. Thank you for the compliment. Hooking his hand to Cecil, Natsu hooked, said, Come on, Talon, we are here to fight. Cecil frowned slightly. I don't want to be called Talon. It's the dragon of the earth. The dragon that controls the earth. Dash, the voice fell, and Cecil started to take a step, running towards Natsu. What kind of dragon you are, I promised. The flames began to gather wildly in Natsu's hands, recalling the time when he volunteered to fight Cecil just now. Luo Xingchen's understatement made Natsu furious. Forget it, although it is also a dragon, but you are completely restrained, you cannot win. These words are still echoing in my mind to this day. The flames are getting bigger and bigger. Natsu gritted his teeth, and the veins on his forehead burst out. I promise, Xingchen, I will definitely win you. Along with the roar, Natsu also stepped forward, fist to fist again. The violent forces are constantly fighting in this space. The fist and the fist were madly clashing, causing a dull sound after another. Seeing Natsu at the moment, Cecil began to feel a little frightened. AAA, before in his own hands, Natsu had almost no ability to fight back, both in terms of skill and power. The current Natsu and the Natsu who just fought with him are like two people. This guy, what's the matter? With such doubts, Cecil threw a punch in the air, ushered in a heavy counterattack from Natsu. It slammed into his abdomen again, hitting the position just injured. The pain struck again. Cecil's eyes widened, and he took 2 steps back uncontrollably. "What's going on?" he murmured in confusion. Even if the skills have improved a lot in the battle just now, it's too hard to explain. The most outrageous thing is that Natsu's power is obviously much stronger than just now. How can this be explained? Cecil, covering her stomach, doesn't understand. On the opposite side, watching his attack work, Natsu couldn't help but let out a roar. "I said this time, I must win you." 35, damn it, kid. Cecil gritted her teeth. Not far away, Luo Xingchen, who was watching this scene, smiled and stopped paying attention to Natsu. Instead, he set his eyes on Dai Lionra, who was in front of him, because he knows Natsu will definitely win this time. The guy always grows fast in battle. And Natsu also has the most precious thing: emotional fire. The more angry, the more violent the fire will be. And the one that provokes Natsu's anger the most, it just means that he is weaker than someone on the same level. Urza on the side followed Luo Xingchen's gaze. She looked at Dai Lion, who was roaring constantly. "Xingchen, what do you mean by what you just said?" "Luo Xingchen, right?" Luo Xingchen hasn't replied yet. Not far away, the voice of Hagrid in a cape rang out, staring closely at Luo Xingchen. "Your name is very loud in the dark world." 35. "Although I admire your courage, it's a pity that it's too late, Dai Lion." He looked at Dai Lion, who had broken free from the ice. An excited smile appeared on his face. "It has completely recovered." "Ho ho ho." As if responding to Hagrid's words, Dai Lion raised his huge head. There was a roar that was enough to shake the surrounding ground. The ice that originally bound his legs was completely shattered at this moment, turned into a stream of water sprinkled on ground. "Very good, very good." Hagrid kept shouting. The body shrouded in the cloak slowly bent down. Both hands touched the magic circle extending from the ground. Magic pours out. Immediately, the magic circle carved out of the ground began to shine with dazzling light. "Stop that guy." Watching Hagrid's actions, Urza let out a roar. "Although I don't know what will happen after the magic circle shines. But definitely not a friendly thing." So Urza hardly thinks too much. He ran towards Hagrid. Mira Jane also reacted immediately, and the light flickered on her body. The devil Satan has come again. The blade and the black light slammed into Hagrid's body in the next moment. Suddenly, terrifying energy exploded. The provoked explosion directly sent Hagrid flying out. It hit the ground hard. "Aha, it's useless." Hagrid's mouth curled into a smile. He slowly got up from the ground and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The excitement on Hagrid's face didn't fade in the slightest. "The preparations for the magic circle have already been completed. You only need to input magic power to activate it. You can't stop it." Indeed, as Hagrid said, even if he lost his magic power supply, the magic circle was still shining. The ancient characters inscribed in the magic circle are also constantly rotating. Urza Mirajane's face turned ugly. And now, the angry demon waved its huge fist and slammed towards Luo Xingchen and the others. Scarlet eyes were fixed on Gray in front of him. It will never forget that magic. The magic that kept it sealed for 10 years. And now, seeing this magic again, instinct drives Dai Lion to pull. Gray must be completely buried here. Is it too late? Gray stared blankly at the scene in front of him. "It's all said and done, then leave it to me." Luo Xingchen's calm voice seemed to soothe Gray's troubled heart. Looking at the back and front, Gray gradually calmed down. Yes, there is also Luo Xingchen. That back figure seems to be so reliable no matter what time it is. As long as he is there, nothing is invincible. Ho-ho! Dai Lion's drawn fist quickly approached the crowd. The huge fist set off a strong wind pressure, as if to destroy everything. Smashed towards the crowd below. "Stars, get out of the way." Lucy looked at the falling fist, his pupils shrinking. "It's okay." Luo Xingchen looked directly at the huge fist that came. The roaring fist wind blew his bangs, showing that calm face. Slowly raising his fist, Gildart's badge instantly melted into his body. Because of this demon, Luo Xingchen swung his right fist at Dai Lion's fist. The fists, one big and one small, collided at this moment, caused a huge roar. I have entered death. Indeed, although Dai Lion pulls the resurrection because of the help of the ghost of the corpse. Wake up a day earlier than in the original. However, this day can't change anything. After 10 years of Ulu's consumption, Dai Lianla has already lost his vitality. Standing in front of Luo Xingchen at this moment, it's just a body without a soul. The power of shattering exploded completely within Dai Lianla's body. Ka ka ka, ka 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 ka, a pure white grid-like halo gradually emerged above Dai Lianla's body. A series of cracks began to spread over Dai Lianla's body. The demon's roar stopped there. Accompanied by the halo becoming more intense. Under everyone's horrified eyes, Dai Lion's huge body shattered, turned into the sky of debris floating in the air. Although it's not the first time I said it, but Luo Xingchen turned around. Looking at Gray, he said softly, "Your master is really great. It turns out. Tears began to flow from Leon's eyes. It turns out, I have never been able to surpass Ulu. Originally cold ice crystals turned into soft water, flowing slowly on the ground. Glittering sparkles. Meanwhile, Gray covered half of his face with his hands. Tears kept slipping from between his fingers and flowing into the stream of water. The darkness in your heart. Let me seal it." The words seem to echo around. It also seems to be Ulu's last blessing to his beloved disciple. Thank you, Master." Gray burst into tears. From now on, she should be all over the ocean. Lucy rubbed his red eyes. Gray bent over, his hands together, and held up a puddle of water. Let it ooze out from the crevice of the palm. Gritting his teeth, Gray murmured softly, "Farewell, Master." B. Chapter 133, Super Ancient Large-Scale Magic. That's a good ending. See the fall of Dai Lianla. Urza was also relieved, and that guy's fight isn't over yet. Mira Jane brushed aside Natsu, who was fighting Cecil. "Going to help?" Urza asked. "Forget it, that guy hits hard." Mira Jane shook her head. The two of them chatted to themselves and didn't care about the distance. Desperate Hagrid. How could? Hagrid put his hands on the ground. His eyes were fixed on the shattered huge body in front of him. The mouth kept muttering, "Dai Lion. Has he already lost his life? 55, could it be that everything we do has been futile? Sure, poor fellows." Mira Jane folded her arms and pouted. "However, I'm curious. What exactly is the magic circle you set up?" Urza's eyes turned to the huge magic circle on the ground. Due to the dissipation of Dai Lion Pull, the light 717 in the magic circle has also dissipated and calm has returned. Super ancient large-scale magic. Reincarnation engraving, right? Luo Xingchen, who was not far away, spoke up. "I wasn't quite sure at first, but I stumbled into the bottom floor with Natsu and found the altar. Ancient writing is engraved on it. It means to rotate the source of life and achieve a new body." Hearing Luo Xingchen's words, Hagrid raised his head in surprise. Looking at the figure not far away, "I didn't expect you even know this." He shook his head gently. "Indeed, I will turn Dai Lion's immortal demon element and consciousness into the body of the dead dragon, to wake up this sleeping body. According to the assumption, wearing Lion's demon factor can repair the rotten body of the dragon. And Dai Lion, who has the body of a giant dragon." Self-deprecating smile. The combination of demon and dragon. How strong will it be? But I didn't expect Dai Lianla to have already entered death. The previous ambitions seemed to have completely disappeared with the disappearance of Dai Lianla. At this moment, what Hagrid had in his eyes was endless loneliness. "Although you're a loser now, you'd better lie down for me." Mira Jane raised her clenched demonic claws, aimed at Hagrid, then slammed down. The fist fell, and Hagrid's vision began to blur gradually, and then he landed on the ground. Unconscious. The other side. The battle between Natsu and Cecil has also come to an end. Boom! The fist wrapped in stone and the fist wrapped in flames met in midair. What ushered in was not that the flames were covered up. Instead, the stones were burned. The temperature of the raging fire is starting to get higher and higher. The horror in Cecil's eyes grew stronger. Blue veins burst out on Natsu's forehead. At the corners of his eyes, there were faint patterns of dragon scales. What's wrong? Talon, your fist is not hard enough. Natsu let out a roar-like sound. Don't be complacent, kid. Cecil gritted her teeth, who was being suppressed. The magic power began to flow out again, and Cecil puffed out her mouth. Seeing Natsu's pupils shrink, immediately responded to Cecil with the same move. Earth dragons, fire dragons, one roar. It was a roar that was almost zero distance, and it broke out with a bang. The terrifying impact directly knocked the two people in contact into the air. They slammed into the wall behind them one after another. Cough, cough. Cecil coughed twice and touched the corner of his mouth. I really didn't expect it, Fire Dragon. I didn't expect you to have such a huge potential. However, that's the end of it, he roared loudly. His hands immediately touched the ground. All the magic power in the body poured out, and suddenly the ground began to surge like a wave. Earth Dragon's earth-splitting tide. The surging ground directly swallowed Natsu's entire body. The violent magic turned into countless sharp stones surging along the ground. The constant impact hit Natsu, who was completely covered by the ground. The scars are increasing, but more serious. It is the space around it that is starting to shrink, in a position that is constantly descending in the midst of the earth, as if to completely bury Natsu in the depths of the earth. Let's fall asleep in the earth with your non-existent dragon. Fire Dragon. Cecil let out a roar-like roar. Natsu, happy, next to Lucy suddenly exclaimed. Xingchen, save Natsu. They both looked at Luo Xingchen and shouted. Don't panic. Natsu's magic power is still there. That guy won't lose to the same person a second time. Luo Xingchen, who was holding his arms around him, shook his head. His eyes were fixed on where Natsu had just stood, where the ground has been restored to level. But there is a faint wisp of green smoke seeping from the gap. Next second, as Luo Xingchen said, everyone present felt Natsu's magic power boiling. Igneel has always existed in this world, a whole guy. Boom dash. Accompanied by a roar from the depths of the ground, the angry dragon flame completely broke through the shackles of the ground, creating a huge pothole. Proudly burned with this space. Pop 1, a large hand clings to the edge of the pothole. Natsu slowly got up from the ground. The dragon scales at the corners of his eyes became clearer on his face that was terrifying because of anger. This guy, what kind of monster is he? Looking at this scene, Cecil couldn't help but take 2 steps back. His brows furrowed tightly, sweat oozing from his forehead. It slid across the cheek and dripped onto the ground. Tread. Natsu stepped forward, the flames burning even more fiercely. The crackling sound was like a dragon roaring. Look at me. Natsu stared at Cecil. Natsu started to move and run. BD. Cecil stretched out his hands, and the magic power was clinging to his body. The hard armor of the Earth Dragon is not something that anyone can break. The magic circle unfolded under his feet. A khaki light enveloped his body. Immediately, his skin began to glow with a khaki luster. Earth Dragons, precipice armor now. Natsu had already rushed in front of Cecil. The raging flames seemed to condense into the phantom of the dragon. Dragon is still dazzling in this era. With a roar, Natsu shook his fist. Fire Dragon's 1, Iron Fist. Wing Strike, Sword Horn, Flame Elbow. 95A series of attacks directly broke Cecil's defense. The body began to seep a lot of blood and scars. In the raging fire, under the threat of the dragon, Cecil seemed to have forgotten how to scream. He seemed to see, in the endless flames, the roaring red dragon. Hoo dash. The flames are roaring. Natsu is roaring. Spreading out his hands, endless flames gathered in Natsu's hand 1.1. Dragon slaying profound, truth, red, lotus, blazing blade. The flames turned into countless sharp knives, scrambling across Cecil's body. Boom, boom, boom. Cecil was directly shot into the air. As he kept screaming, his consciousness began to blur. The powerless body flew straight out, drawing a long trajectory in midair. Boom! Cecil fell beside Hagrid. His body moved, as if he wanted to raise his head, but the scars all over his body no longer allow him to do so. Finally, I won. Natsu, whose magic power had almost dissipated, shook his body. But in the end, he still stood firm. Turning his head slowly, he showed a far-fetched smile in Luo Xingchen's direction. Seems to be saying, look, as I said, I will win. This guy, Luo Xingchen, who was hugging his arms, raised the corner of his mouth and shook his head gently. Yeah, Natsu has grown up. It has grown to the point of being able to stand alone. Chapter 134, Prepare. Slay the dragon. It looks like it's almost done. Lucy put his hands on his hips and looked around. Lion Pull has been crushed. Cecil was defeated and Hagrid was knocked out by Urza and Mira Jane. There are no enemies around. He sighed involuntarily. After calming down the surging magic power, Natsu came to the crowd. Natsu, are you all right? I'm worried to death. Happy threw himself into Natsu's arms. Sorry, Happy, for worrying you. Natsu smiled and rubbed Happy's head. Anyway, it's over now, right? Gray asked. This is the completion of the S-rank mission. Although still a little weak, Natsu raised his fists above his head. There was excitement in his tone. So, we could go up to the second floor. Lucy's eyes twinkled gold. What are you thinking? Luo Xingchen looked strangely. Look at the people in front of you. If you want to go to the second floor, you are still early. Urza changed back to her usual attire and spoke slowly. Mira Jane folded her arms and struck mercilessly. And don't forget, the curse on Galena Island isn't over yet. That is to say, the task of S-Class has not been completed, and you are still too young. Lucy looked at Mira Jane suspiciously. He asked, but isn't Lionra dead? Should the curse of the village be lifted? Who told you that the state of the villagers was caused by Daly's 22 oiler? Luo Xingchen shook his head, looking at Lucy, Natsu, Gray, and others in front of him. So, you still have a long way to go. Come on, it seems that everyone is still wondering. Urza explained aloud. If the guess is correct, it is the terrifying magic of the moondrop that brings this pain to the villagers. 99. Therefore, even if Lionla died, it would not improve the conditions of the villagers. Lucy covered his mouth in surprise and exclaimed, How so? So, the task of S-Class is not that simple. Luo Xingchen slapped everyone in time. Aside, Gray came to Leon. With a sigh, he bent down to help Leon, who fell to the ground. Gray, what are you doing? Leon opened his tightly closed eyes, murmured softly, Well, it's my senior brother after all. It's not good to leave you here, right? Gray put Leon's hand on his shoulder. I plan to walk out of this ruin with Leon. A sudden sound interrupted everyone's conversation. Everyone, including Luo Xingchen, turned around. He looked at the super ancient magic circle that re-emerged with light. You can't get out. Hagrid, who had been knocked out by Mira Jane, sat up slowly. What do you mean? Mira Jane asked, frowning tightly. Hagrid shook his neck and said in a deep voice, Once the rotary engraving is started, it cannot be stopped. There was no pause, and there was no opportunity for everyone to ask questions. Hagrid continued, During the time just now, I thought a lot. Did you just pretend? Urza felt something wrong. Of course, as the leader of the Ghost of the Corpse, do you think I will be defeated so easily? Hagrid smiled and shook his head. I'm just thinking about running away. It's still going to be a fight. After all, I am confident that I can't escape from your encirclement. The light of the magic circle engraved in rotation gradually enveloped Hagrid's body. However, after a while, I thought about it. Rather than being a bereaved dog, it's better to be a being that everyone in the world fears. Slowly raising his head, Hagrid's face was extremely hideous. So, I sacrificed myself to the dragon. The voice fell, and everyone suddenly showed a look of surprise. However, according to what you just said, without Lion's immortal demon element, the dragon's body cannot be recovered. Lucy watched Hagrid speak out loud. Then just don't recover. Hagrid retorted. No matter what you say, it's also a giant dragon. Even if it's a dead giant dragon, it's still a giant dragon. Bowing his head slightly, Hagrid said again. Although I don't know why, the well-preserved giant dragon has no magic power in its body. However, this does not affect its strength. You must know that the dragon itself is a creature beyond the reach of human beings. Saying this, Urza couldn't help but look at Luo Xingchen. Regarding the giant dragon stored in the ground, Luo Xingchen also said it during the conversation just now. It was the dragon from within the Plata waters. When the giant dragon was discovered, its body was indeed full of magic. It's just that Luo Xingchen took it away. On the other side, Hagrid's words continued. And now I've made up my mind, since Dai Lion is gone, I'll be the dragon myself. Under the reflection of the light, even the body began to have cracks. However, a crazy smile appeared on his face. From the very beginning, you have no chance of winning. 35, but all of this is almost something. The voice fell, and he looked at Cecil, who was dying. He stretched out his palms suddenly, and a magic circle spread out on Cecil's back. Suddenly, Cecil's back exploded. The blood was sprayed out as if it didn't cost money. Ah! The severe pain even woke Cecil, who had fallen into a coma. Instantly, there was a miserable howl. He looked at the man in the cloak in disbelief. Father, father, why? 35, he widened his eyes and murmured, Didn't you promise? As long as it is my will, as long as it is my arrangement, you will definitely do it without complaint? Hagrid's mouth raised a smile. The magic circle in his hand spun even faster. Cecil's eyes widened, full of unbelievable eyes locked on Hagrid's body. He opened his mouth and seemed to want to say something, but couldn't make any sound. I can only watch my life go by bit. Then, in the eyes of everyone, on Cecil's back, a khaki-colored crystal slowly emerged from the blood-soaked back. Dragon Slayer Crystal. Luo Xingchen recognized it immediately. Yes, if you want a dragon to have the power of a real dragon, you must destroy the Dragon Demon Crystal. Hagrid spoke slowly. UBD, what did you do? Looking at the scene in front of him, Natsu asked angrily. Hagrid's expression did not fluctuate because of Cecil, still keeping that crazy smile. This is his destiny from the moment I chose to bury the Dragon Slayer crystal in his body 2 years ago. 35. His mission is already doomed to make sacrifices for the recovery of the dragon. The Dragon Slayer crystal of the earth was completely stripped from Cecil's body. Looking at the crystal emitting a faint light, at the moment of appearing in the magic circle, it directly turned into countless light spots and disappeared into the magic circle. Hagrid smiled, smiling happily, and said, The Dragon Slayer crystal bred by the dragon will contain the Master's breath. Therefore, it cannot be applied to another dragon, but magic crystals used by humans will gradually assimilate the dragon's breath in the human body. So, for such a boring reason, you're looking at your own child, right? Urza was trying his best to suppress his anger. Are you really a father? 35, it's just an adopted child. Hagrid waved his hand indifferently. From beginning to end, he was nothing but my weapon. UBD. Natsu couldn't take it anymore. The flames clinged to his fist, and Natsu charged towards Hagrid. It's useless, Natsu. That guy has already been completely drained of his life by the magic circle. Luo Xingchen, behind him, shook his head. Things can't be stopped. As Luo Xingchen said, Natsu's fist hit Hagrid. The screams in 717 were not expected. Yes, they're only broken pieces like broken clay figures. At the same time, hidden in the dark space on the next floor, the flickering candles flickered. The faint light seemed to be extinguished at any moment. In the center of this space, above the huge altar, bathed in the light of the super ancient magic circle, the behemoth that should have lost its vitality abruptly moved its dragon claws. The giant dragon, who had been closing his eyes for a long time, opened his eyes. The scarlet light gradually filled the originally godless eyes, slowly opened the hideous mouth that had been closed for 400 years. Howl next moment, as if a roar from hell broke the island that had just regained its tranquility. The wild magic breaks the shackles of the ground, covered the entire Galena Island. This moment, the whole island seems to be shaking. Just kidding. This is a dragon. Lucy felt like his brain was almost out of use. The first is the emergence of the Dark Union. This was followed by Die Lion's resurgence. At last, even creatures like giant dragons buried in the long river of history. It even appeared. How scary is the S-Class mission? Xingchen, what should I do now? Everyone's eyes turned to Luo Xingchen, who was standing at the front. Don't know when it started. This man seemed to be the backbone of everyone, although he never thought of it that way. But neither is calm in the face of crisis. An accurate judgment of the current situation and that bottomless power. All of this unconsciously makes people want to rely on. Same now. He lowered his eyes slightly and clenched his fists unconsciously. Luo Xingchen spoke slowly. Everyone, we have no way out, so get ready to slay the dragon. Chapter 135, Feeling. Anger from 400 years ago. The roar of the giant dragon broke the tranquility of the entire island. The earth is shaking, the sea is surging, the trees are howling, and the sky is shaking. The violent magic swept the entire Galuna island in an instant. Located in the village in the center of the island, countless villagers responded. Everyone gathered on the central square. A look of panic appeared on everyone's face. Headmaster, what happened? What the hell is that sound? Too horrible. It's no wonder. Even for a long-established wizard, I am afraid that it is impossible to keep calm under the pressure of the dragon. Not to mention the small villages that are already isolated from the world. Dong, dong, dong. The sound of the scepter hitting the ground sounded as the oldest village chief in the village, Shun Sheng, said, "Everyone, be quiet." 35, quiet. An old but steady voice interrupted everyone's panic. The villagers who were turned into demons under the influence of the moondrop turned their attention to the direction of the village chief. This is the curse of the moon, the calamity we cannot escape. He looked in the direction of the ruins. It was also the direction from which the roar came. The village chief said slowly, "Now, we can only wait." Waiting for the victory of the wizards from fairy tale. Among the ruins at this moment, the underground floor where Die Lionra is stored. The terrifying sound waves made the surrounding vibrate violently. Ugh! Lucy stumbled and fell to the ground. Is this the strength of a giant dragon? Just roaring makes people unable to stand up. With the vibration gone, Lucy, who was sitting on the ground, complained, but there was no response from his peers. Raising his head suspiciously, Lucy found that everyone's eyes were focused on him. Staring hard at Lucy, Happy, who remained standing, blinked. Turning his head to look at the crowd, he complained, "Lucy is so weak." Everyone nodded in agreement. He turned his head, ignoring Lucy's wide-eyed eyes. "That eye." Lucy opened his mouth, but seeing that everyone ignored him and closed his voice in embarrassment, silently stood up and waited. Attention, the magic power is getting bigger and bigger. The dragon is coming. Luo Xingchen at the front reminded in a deep voice. So excited, comma. Natsu clenched his fists. Although the magic power has not been fully restored, but as a dragon slayer, there's nothing more exciting than confronting a dragon. Leon was seated by himself, leaning against the wall. He looked at the group of figures who were about to meet the dragon. Mixed flavors inside. He just asked everyone, why not run? This is a good question. Indeed, in the face of a giant dragon, this group of people not only did not run, but even dared to attack like a giant dragon. How daring do you have to be to do such a thing? But that's when Leon's came to a point. The answer he couldn't understand yet. That's what Gray said. His whole body was obviously covered with scars, but at that time Gray's tone was extremely firm. Because I'm not fighting alone. There is nothing to fear as long as there are companions. 55 words are short, but the content contained in them is that Leon has lived to this day. Things that can't be understood. His thoughts returned, and the corner of Leon's mouth raised a smile. Anyway, I don't have any choice, it's up to you. Fairy tale, let me see, is called The Power of Companions. Bottom of the ruins. On the altar where the remains of the dragon are kept. The sleeping dragon flicked its claws. Supported on the altar, slowly propped up the entire body, shaking the slightly dizzy dragon head. The dragon let out a dull exhale. Roar, roar. A low, thunderous roar resounded slowly. The dragon looked at his huge body. Most of the flesh and blood on the blue body that should have covered the entire body has been lost. At the tip of the tail, at the right leg, at the left shoulder, deep bones have been exposed in these places. The rest of the body also showed large swathes of decay. If it weren't for the fact that it still retained a little magic power, I am afraid that its body will not have a bit of flesh and blood. Looking at all this, humanized doubts appeared in the dragon's eyes. Its original memory has been blurred. No, it should be said that there is no previous memory. Why did it become like this? Why did it wake up? What to do next? It doesn't know any of this. Suddenly, a voice appeared in my mind. It seems to be guiding it what to do next. Shaking his head suspiciously, the dragon ignored the voice in his head. After all, it was so tiny that the dragon even thought it was a noise. Continued to explore the depths of memory, but did not find the result it wanted. Blank, blank, blank. In this body whose soul has completely dissipated, there seems to be only blank space left. Not even his own name was known. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the dragon's mind. That was the only bit of information the dragon could find out. Although it was very blurry, the giant dragon could clearly see the pitch-black wings that seemed to cover the sky. The scarlet pupils shrank sharply. Roar! The dragon let out a deafening roar, mixed with pain and despair. It was in an endless sky. The azure-blue body kept fleeing in front of him. The jet-black wings fanned constantly from the rear. That terrifying power is still so terrifying to this day. The behemoth that fanned its jet-black wings let out a roaring roar. Under its roar, a black torrent obscures all sight of it. The scattered memories ended here, perhaps because of the black torrent. It has completely entered the path of annihilation. Hoo! The angry dragon let out a deafening roar, as if roaring at the figure in the memory. It also seems to be announcing his return to this world. It doesn't know what its mission to wake up again is. But, overwhelmed by despair, its mind is full of, it is the firework of revenge. It is a bloodthirsty instinct. Without any memory, follow instinct. No creature can escape such a law. It just never knows. The consciousness in his own body is not his at all. The reason why it wakes up is just to wake up its body. Why is there dull and short-term thinking? Just because instinct devoured the consciousness of invasion. Those who try to control the dragon. What he finally ushered in was not the mastery of this powerful force as he had hoped, but to die completely after achieving an uncontrollable monster. Was completely erased from the world. Zhao da Zhao. The disfigured wings that had been corroded fluttered open. Then incited, strong wind pressure roams wildly in this nearly closed space. At the same time, the huge body of the giant dragon also began to slowly lift into the air, with the frequency of the wings flapping faster and faster. The dragon directly smashed through the ceiling above his head. Roar! It was a roar of rebirth and a harbinger of destruction. A terrifying sound wave instantly swept the entire negative floor space. He even wrapped Luo Xingchen and covered his ears involuntarily. The giant dragon did not stop, but went straight to the top. Boom, 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 dash. It smashed through layer after layer of shackles until it broke through the restrictions of the ruins, hovering over the entire Galena Island. The ferocious mouth slowly opened. That 400-year-old anger, at the moment of awakening, it has been completely detonated. At this moment, the roar of the dragon resounded throughout Galena Island, as if making a declaration to everyone. Feel anger from 400 years ago. Chapter 136, The Down Dragon. In the black silent night sky, the azure blue body kept roaring in the air. The terrifying sound waves turned into substantial ripples and spread wildly around. A terrifying gust of wind stirred up. Countless flowers and trees were uprooted under this gust of wind. It was a giant dragon, with azure blue scales covering part of its body. The rest are rotting flesh. Most of the parts are exposed with white bones. All of this does not seem like a noble and powerful dragon. More like the monster called zombie that Luo Xingchen had seen in his previous life movies. Now, the creatures on countless islands also seem to have noticed the huge dragon standing above the sky. Start running wildly, under the pressure of the dragon at the top of the biological chain. It is impossible for this group of creatures who cannot even possess magic power to remain calm. The dragon that had just woken up from its long slumber slowly flapped its wings. Fly high in the sky, scarlet eyes stared at the island below. The rich vitality on the island is as bright as a beacon in its eyes. He slowly raised his hideous mouth. Terrifying magic power gathered in the dragon's mouth. But it is not the thunder magic power of the dragon itself. Its own power was completely deprived as early as 400 years ago. Even a magic power remaining in the flesh turned into Luo Xingchen's power. Therefore, the magic power of Dragon 717 is brought by the Dragon Slayer crystal from the earth that was stripped from Cecil's body. As the crystallization of the power of the Dragon Slayer crystal, humanity cannot fully exert its full power. Even giant dragons of the same race cannot exert their full powers that do not belong to them. However, in terms of control over the Dragon Slayer crystal, dragons are naturally infinitely more powerful than humans. The magic power that belongs to the earth keeps flowing towards the dragon's mouth. The converging khaki rays of light also began to grow larger and larger, as if to light up the sky shrouded in darkness. Whoa, 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 whoa. Suddenly there was a roar from below. The giant dragon vaguely caught the dazzling fire from the bottom up. An idea popped up in the head that couldn't think complicatedly. The flames below are provoking yourself. Human beings, as ants, are loudly provoking themselves as dragons. The flames are getting closer, closer, through the raging flames. The dragon could see the true face of the ants. Sakura-colored hair, fluttering wildly in the flames. Above the clenched fist, the blue veins burst wildly. The cheeks are filled with unprecedented seriousness and a trace of excitement. On his back, Happy grabs him and soars. The high-speed wind pressure blew its blue cat face beyond recognition. Go, Happy! Natsu yelled. ISA. Happy flapped his wings in response. The speed of one person and one cat began to accelerate rapidly. Facing the giant dragon in front of him, Natsu rushed forward without hesitation. Fire dragons, the dragon flapped its wings and turned around, and its ferocious mouth, which gathered magic power, aimed at Natsu in front of him. Tekken. The giant fist wrapped in flames slammed into the dragon's jaw. At the same time, the roar of the giant dragon burst out. The flames erupted as soon as they smashed up. The exploding sparks continued to fly around. The entire head of the giant dragon received a strong impact, and it swept straight up into the sky. The terrifying magic power that gathered half a sound shot straight into the sky. The terrifying explosion exploded, dispersed the huge clouds that filled the sky. Roar! The dragon roared. The flames that had just hit him made him feel pain. Nice work, Natsu. 35 at the top of the ruins, Gray shouted excitedly aside. Luo Xingchen came to the very edge of the top of the ruins. The terrifying impact that exploded above caused a raging gust of wind, which blew his clothes. And black hair. He looked at the people beside him. Are you ready? Don't worry. Urza nodded knowingly. As soon as you shoot the guy, we'll catch up with the controls. Gray raised his fist. With most of his magic power restored, he is confident that he can complete such a task. Anyway, it's up to you. Mira Jane patted Luo Xingchen on the shoulder. Xingchen, come on. Lucy raised his small fist, cheering loudly. Nodding lightly, Luo Xingchen looked directly at the giant dragon still entangled with Natsu above the sky. The badge of Yulilong appeared in his hand. Does this count as hitting yourself? A strange idea popped into my mind. Luo Xing, CCBB, Chen shook his head. Throw the badge high. The magic circle unfolds, and under the reflection of light, the corners of Luo Xingchen's eyes began to gradually appear dragon scales. The power of the dragon with full output. The violent energy belonging to Yulei began to occupy his body. Boom, boom, boom. The scattered thunder and lightning made a dull sound of explosions on the surrounding ground. Without the slightest hesitation, Luo Xingchen stepped forward. The footsteps stepped on the edge of the ruins, and the huge force directly smashed the top edge of the stone. With the strength of this rebound, Luo Xingchen, who turned into a thunderbolt, dashed towards the sky. Yuleilong's collapsed fist. 99 boom. Roar. The roar of the attack and the wailing of the dragon resounded almost at the same time. Compared to the fist that Natsu had just landed on the dragon, this punch made it even more painful. As well as that touch of familiarity, the dragon was not given any chance to think. Luo Xingchen took advantage of the huge shoulders of the giant dragon, leaped high towards the top of his head, and the clenched fist slammed down. Boom! The azure, blue thunder and lightning fell from the sky, wrapped around Luo Xingchen's fist, violently landed on the dragon's head. The terrifying shock made his raised head drop. Natsu, leave with Happy first. Luo Xingchen looked up at Natsu and Happy opposite. Clear. Love. One person and one cat responded, and under the leadership of Happy, they flew towards the ground. Seeing this, Luo Xingchen walked directly towards the dragon's back. It seemed that he sensed that the figure who had just hit him hard was still on his back. The dragon let out an angry roar. It seems to be getting more restless. The wings behind him flapped more rapidly. The whole body began to turn over, trying to completely get rid of the figure on the back. Seemingly expected, Luo Xingchen firmly grasped the bony spur on the dragon's back, quietly waiting for the moment when the dragon turns over. Sure enough, even a giant dragon couldn't maintain an irregular flight for a long time. The entire body returned to the face-down and back-up position. Luo Xingchen stood on the dragon's back to stabilize his body. The magic within the body began to pour out continuously. It turned into lightning and gathered in his mouth. His cheeks bulged, and a blue magic circle unfolded in front of him. Yuleilong's roar, a breath more intense than the roar, burst out. It landed on the right wing of the dragon. Want to shoot down such a huge body of the dragon? Only attacking the wings is the best and most effective way. The right wing exploded with the sound of wailing. The huge body of the giant dragon also began to smash toward the ground rapidly. Boom! The giant dragon smashed into the forest full of trees, and the dust was everywhere. At the top of the ruins, Luo Xingchen fell from the air. Natsu is caught in the air by Happy. Did it work? Gray asked with his eyes fixed on the smoke ahead. How is it possible that guy? Luo Xingchen shook his head with a serious tone, totally irritated. Oh, as Luo Xingchen said, the dragon's roar shattered the smoke and dust. Chapter 137, The Power of the Dragon, is so terrifying. Roar, roar. The dragon was roaring continuously for the figure who just shot himself down from midair, and those who dared to attack themselves let out a deafening roar. The dragon, who had just woken up from his long sleep, was completely angered by these people. For it, anything that doesn't obey its will anger its disobedient ministers. The magic began to gather crazily. The dragon seemed to be about to unleash that roar that would destroy everything again. Get out of the way! Urza yelled for the first time. The next moment, the people who were still gathered on the top floor of the ruins dodged all around. Immediately afterwards, the thick khaki-yellow beam of light landed directly on the position where everyone was standing just now. A terrifying explosion exploded. Just for a moment, the original 3-story relic was under such an explosion. Nearly half of the building was destroyed. It's really dangerous. Gray turned his head and murmured, "Up!" Urza called out loudly from the front. "Ah!" Gray turned his head. The hands touched together, and the chill continued to permeate between them. Ice May Clancer. 35, a azure blue magic circle unfolded in his hands. Immediately afterwards, countless ice spears fell on the huge body of the giant dragon. The icy chill restricted the dragon's further movements. Transformation, armor of purgatory. Urza, who was running at high speed, shone all over his body. Pure black armor appeared on her body. Holding a man-high, serrated sword in both hands, Urza approached the dragon, then slammed down. Boom! The serrated sword slashed on the dragon's body, but did not break the dragon's defense, and attracted the dragon's attention. Raising the dragon's claws violently, the dragon swung towards Urza. The huge claws seemed to cover Urza completely. The wind pressure created by pressing down blew up her long crimson hair. "Urza, get out of the way!" Mira Jane exclaimed from behind. "I know." Almost at the moment when the voice just fell, Urza put the flying armor on his body. With the extremely high movement speed of the flying armor, Urza was able to avoid the dragon's claws. Even a dragon with an incomplete body, but its power is still strong, just a simple swipe. The ground trembled slightly. At the same time, while Urza was entangled with the dragon, Mira Jane has approached the dragon's rear. As a magic circle flickered, surging magic power surged around her. Take over, Magen Shutley. A blue-white coat is attached to the body, and the long silver-white hair that stands up is curly. The armor from the ears extended to the chin, wrapping it up. The lower edge of the black cloak behind him seemed to be burning with the flames of hell. Mira Jane's most powerful satanic soul so far. Dark energy gathered in both hands. Mira Jane's eyes were locked tightly on the part that wasn't covered with dragon scales. Then, the magic power in his hand was turned into a shock and erupted. The pure black beam of light takes less than a second. It fell on the dragon. Boom! A violent explosion was triggered, and the dragon also let out a whimper. "It works!" Mira Jane's eyes lit up. He shouted at the crowd, "Attack the places that are not covered by dragon scales. The defense of those places is very weak." 39, I see. Urza, who was wearing the armor of flight, stopped. His eyes never took his eyes off the dragon for a moment. Therefore, the scene just now was also watched by her. The light flickered again, and the black armor with wings appeared on her body. Holding the black feather sword, Urza stepped forward, constantly moving frantically, avoiding the claws waving by the dragon. Urza came directly under the dragon, with a blow of magic power. It was chopped on the belly of the dragon, without being wrapped by dragon scales. Sure enough, the protection of dragon scales was lost. Dragons are not invincible. Urza's blade cut smoothly into the dragon's belly. Although the scar is not big, but it represents, even if it is human, it can also damage the dragon in front of you. He seemed to notice Luo Xingchen, who was jumping high. Urza pulled out the blade and immediately fanned the wings behind him. Hide aside. The roar.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.